Chapter 887. Ever since the miser Li Gongda became the administrator, his ability to make peace was top-notch. He tried to persuade everyone to make peace and not break up. Thus, Lingzhou became more and more harmonious. Other than the Zhong family, whose roots were in Longqing County, which was a little unhappy, the rest of the families were still doing well. Moreover, old General Zhong's eldest son, Zhong Qingxin, was still the governor of Longqing County. The new noble of northern Liang, Su Beiji, was just a small soldier who was promoted 3 ranks. His position was not that high, but he continued to work for Sir Zhong. It could be seen that the Zhong family and the Su family were not at the point of falling out. However, there was a piece of news that quickly spread in the Lingzhou officialdom. The 2 retainers of the great general Han Laoshan and Su Yanbing had both become Lingzhou's deputy generals. His Royal Highness, who had returned to Beiliang after causing a ruckus in the capital, actually became Lingzhou's general. This made people feel that it was a bit inconceivable. Many retired generals were silently cursing why the crown prince did not just sit on the chair of Beiliang's protector general. Why did he extend his hand into the Lingzhou officialdom? This was not very proper. Anyways, after the new year at the border of Yuzhou, there would be a martial arts examination that was held once every 3 years. Everyone knew that the great general had already started to make arrangements for his death. According to the whispers in the Lingzhou officialdom, rather than Crown Prince Su Fengnian not being liked in Lingzhou, it was better to let Chu Lushan and Yuan Zuozong's 2 foster sons help him to become the commander at the border. Whether it was showing off or hiding in the abyss, it was fine if everyone did not see it and did not feel annoyed. No matter what, it was better than taking over the hot potato that was Lingzhou's general. The mansion of the administrator was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. The doors were wide open to welcome the guest. Sir Li, who was already a rank 2 border official, was grinning from ear to ear. He treated the great general who suddenly came to the Li mansion like a bodhisattva. After obtaining the inside information that His Highness was going to become Lingzhou's general, Li Gongda talked until his mouth was dry. He finally got an old neighbor on the same street to vacate a beautiful mansion. He temporarily hung a plaque and turned it into the Lingzhou general's mansion. Lingzhou's capital had a beautiful Jianghu lake. There were only a few mansions that had the qualifications to draw water into the mansion. The old owner who occupied this place used to be an old general under Beiliang cavalry commander Zhong Hongwu. Later on, he got closer to Dian Xiongzong and the other young generals under Qin Jibao. Li Gongda took advantage of this weakness and used both kindness and power to make the old general leave with his many beautiful wives and concubines. At this moment, Su Fengnian, who had just become a standard 4th-rank general, was taking a leisurely stroll in the general's mansion. Previously, he had gone to the Li mansion to show his face before leaving. He really couldn't resist the administrator's attentiveness, so he left behind Su Xiao and Yuan Zuozong Han Laoshan to accompany him. He brought along one of Lingzhou's deputy generals, Su Yanbing, to walk through the corridors and corridors. Of Wang Xiu's 2 junior brothers, Han Laoshan could be considered familiar with the art of war, but the martial arts maniac beside him, Su Yanbing, was just barely passable. Compared to Han Laoshan, who really wanted to take root in Lingzhou and consolidate at every step, Su Yanbing was just there to deal with unexpected situations. Moreover, Su Yanbing's personal ambitions did not lie here. Before he left the Li manor, Su Xiao had a playful look in his eyes, saying that there was a little surprise waiting for him in the house. Su Fengnian did not have any expectations. He had seen many immortals of the Jianghu flying around. Since he had slacked off on the path of martial arts, needless to say, the secret manuals could be sold at a low price at the Tide Listening Pavilion. He also did not care about divine weapons and sharp weapons. As for women, his 2 future concubines had followed him to Beiliang, so Su Fengnian did not want to attract any emotional debt. However, when Su Fengnian suddenly saw the young girl dressed in Beimang's grassland woman's attire, he was somewhat stunned and pleasantly surprised. He never would have thought that it was the young girl who had great connections with the Beimang imperial family, Huyen Guanyin. Back then, in order to save the tribe she was in, he had stopped the herd of wild bulls in the canyon. Only then did he engage in a deathmatch hunting with Tuoba Chunsun, who was favored by the heavens at the right time and place. At that time, Su Fengnian had almost lost his life to Tuoba Chunsun's lightning spear. Su Yanbing was very tactful. He went to another place to enjoy the scenery, leaving Su Fengnian alone with the girl. Su Fengnian pondered for a bit and understood. After he returned from Beimang, he told her everything in detail about his dangerous experience. During this time he mentioned Huyen Guanyin's Chang flute. He reckoned that it was Su Xiao who followed the vine to find the melon and brought her from Beimang to Lingzhou. Su Fengnian sat with her in the pavilion. He asked her in the prairie language, "Your brother Abaoji didn't come to Bailiang?" The girl with the appearance of 95 was obviously not as melancholy and sentimental as the girls of the Central Plains. She shook her head and said with an open-minded smile, "My brother is a young eagle on the prairie. The prairie is his home. My brother also said that he must become the biggest chick on the prairie and have the most extensive and fertile pastures. In the future he will bring our benefactor to gallop on a horse and snatch the most beautiful girl, the fiercest warhorse, and the best wine for our benefactor." Su Fengnian remembered the strong-headed child who liked to roll around in the sheepfold. He had the boldness to pick up a lamb and throw it around. He smiled and said, "He's much more ambitious than me." The young girl, whose style was between a young girl and a married woman, had a curious look on her face. She couldn't help but gently smile and ask, "Our benefactor always said that he was a scholar from Gusai Prefecture. How did he become the son of a prominent family in Beimeng, the archenemy of Bailiang?" Su Fengnian leaned against a pillar and looked at the small lake in the mansion. He sighed and said, "It's probably the so-called unpredictable affairs of the world." Huyan Guanyin said softly, "There was an old man who was more dignified than the biggest chick on the prairie. He ordered me to be our benefactor's maidservant in the future and serve our benefactor's basic necessities." Su Fengnian said softly, "You don't have to listen to him in the future. We Bailiang women always like to carry swords, ride horses and draw bows. No one can restrain you. Even if you feel that this place is boring and want to go back to the prairie to see your brother, I can send someone to send you to the north." The delicate Chang flute tied to the waist of the dainty and beautiful woman was unexpectedly gloomy and speechless. The death soldier suddenly appeared outside the pavilion and said respectfully, "Your Highness, Su Beiji and Wu General Wang Ji from Dragon Eye County have come to visit." Chapter 888. For now, the Lingzhou general's mansion was nothing more than an empty shell. It was not an exaggeration to say that it had a golden exterior but a rotten interior, because this Lingzhou general's mansion was nothing more than an empty shell. Su Fengnian smiled, nodded and said, "From now on they don't need to report when they come here." There were smart servants in the mansion who led the way for them. Su Fengnian walked out of the pavilion to greet them. Wang Ji's father, Wang Shirzhu, was not only a former subordinate of Bailiang, but also a general of Swords Gate. He was a secret chess piece that Li Yishan had placed in Kuei Gate for many years. This father and son pair eventually played a significant role in the Battle of Iron Gate. Wang Ji was indeed a valiant general who lived up to expectations. Even when facing Han Diaosi he dared to fight to the death. In order to stop the Man-Cat, he lost 1,000 of his 3,000 elite cavalrymen. After joining Bailiang, only half of his 2,000 personal guards were left. Last time, his performance in Longqing County was also very eye-catching. Therefore, Su Fengnian had a very good impression of him. Su Beiji was quick to adapt to the local customs. He was dressed like a scholar, even more so than the famous scholars of Jiangnan. He was elegant and graceful. Wang Ji was escorting him from the side. One was a scholar and the other was a warrior. Huyan Guanyin stood alone and timidly in the pavilion. She seemed to be out of place. Most women were like that. They were just the icing on the cake. Su Fengnian put his arm around Su Beiji's shoulder, smiled to Wang Ji and said, "This time General Wang, you didn't become the Deputy General of Lingzhou. Do you feel angry? If you do, just say it. But I still can't give you the Deputy General position." Wang Ji didn't talk about stage fright. Instead he grinned and said, "Your Highness, we are all rough men. We know that we shouldn't take things that we didn't do. We don't have any achievements now, so we don't feel angry. If we do something great in the future, not to mention the Deputy General position, we can even fight for the position of Lingzhou General. We won't hesitate." Su Fengnian smiled and nodded. He pointed at Su Yanbing who had quietly returned to the pavilion. He introduced, "The new Deputy General of Lingzhou, Su Yanbing. Wang Ji, you should interact with him more in the future. General Su is one of the top martial arts masters in Bailiang. He is much more useful than hanging around me who has no real power." Wang Ji's eyes suddenly brightened. The words, "one of the top," had more weight than the Deputy General of Lingzhou. Yuan Zuozong was the third master in the Liang army after Gu Jiantang and Qin Jibao. If Su Yanbing was one of the top martial artists, he would most likely be a fierce general on the same level as the unparalleled cavalry warrior Yuan Baixiong. Wang Ji didn't dare to underestimate him. He immediately cupped his fist to the Deputy General. Su Yanbing only nodded slightly in return. Su Fengnian looked at Su Beiji and asked with a smile, "Juzi, are you getting along well with young Master Zhong? I heard that those beautiful concubines of his admire your talent and took turns to recommend themselves to you." They even almost fought with Lingzhou's courtesan Belle for your affections. Now Beiliang is spreading the news that there is a Beimang aristocrat called Su Beiji. He is even more carefree than an immortal. Su Beiji smiled faintly, more than enough but far from enough. With His Highness in front of me, this little romance is nothing. Wang Ji was speechless. It was rumored that Su Beiji, who didn't have any strength of character as an official, had a close relationship with His Royal Highness. It seemed that the rumors were true. If it were someone else, they would have been drenched in sweat. Wang Ji didn't dare to treat the Crown Prince of Beiliang, who dared to kill the Western Region Prince with a bottle, as a hedonistic son. Normally, when faced with Zhong Hongwu and the other elders who had fought alongside their fathers in the military, they would try their best to curry favor with them. Su Fengnian and Su Beiji sat in the pavilion. Wang Ji naturally followed Su Yambing to guard outside the pavilion. Su Fengnian glanced at Wang Ji's burly back and retracted his gaze. He smiled and said, "This time there are hundreds of people from the Lu family and Shangyin Academy in Qingzhou. They are all crying piteously for food. Lingzhou's officialdom is bloated and has the most fat meat. The administrator is the peacemaker in Beiliang. He claims to be second, but no one claims to be first. He definitely can't be the bad guy. Chen Shiliang is also busy with the salt and iron industry. Why don't you take over? We can use this opportunity to streamline the positions of the generals and get rid of a large number of idle generals. We can also learn from Beiliang so that we can live up to our name in the future." Su Beiji didn't make a sound. He was quite arrogant. Wang Ji, who was listening attentively, was a bit worried. Beiliang was like living with a tiger. Otherwise, the great general wouldn't have been privately called the second emperor by the imperial court. His Royal Highness was actually no different from the crown prince of a country. Although Wang Ji was careless in front of Su Fengnian, he was also meticulous and meticulous. Those seemingly crude and simple-minded generals in the historical novels were all meticulous people in the official history books. If one wanted to stay by the side of the monarch and not cut off their good fortune, they would have to be very knowledgeable. It was almost like a bottomless pit. Earlier, Wang Ji and Su Beiji had been drinking. At the time, His Royal Highness didn't kneel to the emperor in Taiyan City. Su Beiji was drunk to his heart's content and drank happily. He revealed the tip of the iceberg of his knowledge. When they talked about the matter of planning for the future, just the classification of the officials, Su Beiji gave 19 types. Solitary official, governing official, capable official, toad official, cat official, and corpse official. It was much more complicated than the 9 ranks of martial artists. When Wang Ji heard this, he was both dumbfounded and benefited greatly. He thought that this young Master Su had really cultivated to immortality in the government. Even Wang Ji, who had extremely high horizons, was full of admiration. Su Fengnian continued to ask, "Beiliang officials have the custom of awarding mink hats at the end of the year. Then from the end of winter to the beginning of spring, how about you, Su Beiji, give out a few hundred new mink hats of all sizes in Lingzhou?" Su Beiji asked back, "You, the general of Lingzhou, don't care, but can the administrator not care?" Su Fengnian nodded and said, "Otherwise, why would I be a general? Isn't it because I'm determined to help you block the fierce criticism? I promise you, no matter what words or people, everything will stop when it comes to me. You don't have to look or listen." Su Beiji said calmly, "Lingzhou's provincial governor is currently still held by the administrator. Can your highness give me this hat first?" Wang Ji clicked his tongue in wonder. Su Beiji was really bold. He wanted the hat of a 4th-rank official as soon as he opened his mouth, and he wanted it so righteously. If this got out, wouldn't the Liang officials who had been stuck at this threshold their entire lives be angered half to death? Huyen Guanyin, who had learned some of the language of Liang in this mansion, heard every word and roughly understood the meaning of this conversation. Her mouth fell open slightly as she looked at the gray-haired man. Her eyes were a little dazed. Su Fengnian stood up and smiled, "I'll give it to you now." Chapter 889. The next chapter will be in the wee hours of the morning, so it will still be rather late. Su Fengnian went alone to the mansion of the administrator in Beiliang, whose standard was only lower than that of Mount Qingliang. Now that he was familiar with the Li mansion, he didn't even need the steward to lead him to the back garden where Su Xiao and Li Gongda rested. In the courtyard there was a shady locust tree. The officialdom in Beiliang knew that Li Gongda was fond of planting locust trees in recent years. So many locust trees from other provinces had been moved into the mansion. Planting locust trees in front of the mansion was a sign of good fortune. Li Gongda's talent and learning were not obvious. Nowadays, most of the imperial examinations were in the autumn locust tree season, and the month was also known as the locust tree yellow. It could be seen that official Li was still brooding over the fact that he had failed the imperial examinations many times in the past. Su Fengyin walked along a secluded path lined with hollyhock trees. He saw a long sandalwood couch placed under a tree. Su Xiao was drinking green ant wine alone. Li Gongda used to kneel more than sit in front of the king of Bailiang. Now that he was the administrator, he stood to the side, holding a wine jug and helping to pour wine. In other vassal states, the administrator was a first-class official with the same rank as the minister of the 6 ministries. There was no one like Li Gongda who bowed and bent his knees. Not to mention the administrator of West Chu, Sun Shiji, even the prince of Guangling Zhao Yi had personally visited him several times, but he had been refused the door. Just like Dai Yuzhen, the administrator of the 2 Huaidao. She had openly bullied the prince of Huainan Zhao Yi until he couldn't breathe. From this, one could see the weight of the administrator's authority. As soon as Su Xiao saw Su Fengyin, he immediately wanted to give up the sandalwood couch. However, Su Fengyin ignored him and asked Yuan Zuozong to ask for 2 chairs from the steward of the mansion. He sat down with Li Gongda. The afternoon sun shone on his body, making him feel warm. After drinking a few cups of green ant wine, he knew that His Royal Highness had come back. However, he found that this young man who always called him uncle was not in a hurry to expose him. Therefore, Li Gongda had to sit with him and drink with him. He talked about some interesting anecdotes of Lingzhou, jesting and flattering him. He talked about how His Royal Highness had won the hearts of the people in the capital city. Whether Su Xiao believed it or not was another matter. However, it was comfortable to listen to it and he showed a genial smile. Su Fengyin smiled and looked at it with mixed feelings. At that time, Yan Qiji and Yan Dongwu's father, Yan Jieshi, was the provincial governor of Lingzhou. His official position was about the same as Li Gongda, the provincial governor of Fengzhou who had not been incorporated into Yuzhou at that time. Now, Yan Jieshi had betrayed Bailiang and went to Tian City to be a relative of the royal family. Perhaps he would become the father-in-law of the emperor in the future. Li Gongda was not bad either. He did not become an official in the capital city but became an extreme local official. Actually, Su Fengyin was closer to Uncle Yan at that time. Uncle Li had a bad reputation. However, although both the Yan and Li families had passed the Dragon Gate, the women of the 2 families still hated this dissolute son. The female scholar Yan Dongwu had become the crown princess. Li Fuzhen, on the other hand, was obsessed, and became a scholar from a poor family, who said that the pavilion closest to the water would enjoy the moonlight first. Su Fengyin had been friends with Li Hanlin and Yan Qi for so many years, but he did not get any good treatment from their sister. It was not that Su Fengyin had any improper thoughts towards them. It was just that back then he was frivolous and liked to tease the young ladies of noble families. Yan Dongwu would even argue with him. Su Fengyin was even more ruthless. His harsh words and cold words were lacking, and his eyes were cold all year round. Su Fengyin lazily leaned against the back of the chair and could not help but laugh. Uncle Li was rather open-minded towards the poor scholar who did not match his family background. Not only did he not break them apart, he even secretly paved the way and raised his status. From a poor family to an aristocratic family, and then from a minor official to a high-class official, the 2 matters of status and class were all settled magnanimously. He just did not know if Uncle Li would take the opportunity to make a move again this time when the Lingzhou officialdom was turned upside down. Su Fengyin did not have the intention to make things difficult for the poor scholar. Although he had seen the scholar's face and shrewdness outside Toma Temple, and that fellow had been schemed against by Su Beiji and felt that Su Fengyin had entrusted Li Hanlin to the wrong person. But since Li Hanlin's sister was enjoying it, Su Fengyin could not be bothered to point fingers. If that poor scholar really had the ability to become an official, Su Fengyin would not mind giving him a slightly bigger mink hat. To the Bailiang, whether or not he was an honest official was not important, whether or not he was a capable official was the key. Furthermore, that scholar might become the second Bailiang, who dared to say that Li Fuzhen must have made a mistake. If a woman was foolish, perhaps she would have foolish fortune. When Su Fengyin saw that he had drunk to his heart's content, he looked at Li Gongda in a half-drunk state and said with a smile, "Uncle Li, do you know that there is a young man called Su Beiji in Longqing County?" Although Su Beiji's official position is not high, only a secretary subordinate to Longqing Junju, Uncle Li knows that even Longqing County's governor Zhong Qingxin is extremely respectful towards Su Beiji. Because this person is extremely knowledgeable, what is even more difficult is that he can learn and use it for himself. He is familiar with governance and is not a self-proclaimed lofty bookworm. Many times, Zhong Qingxin did not hesitate to part with his love and did his best to recommend this person to Uncle Li. If your highness did not mention it, Uncle Li would have already decided that after the beginning of spring next year, Su Beiji would be promoted to the position of Lingzhou's Minister of Education, to serve as a province's Minister of Education, so that he can make the best use of his talent. The corners of Su Fengyan's mouth curled up and he nodded. He turned to look at the old man who had been smiling and did not interrupt. Su Xiao, which official position is higher between the Counselor of Learning and Classics? Su Xiao insisted on being a hands-off boss. He raised his cup and pointed at Li Gongda. Don't ask the blind. Father is also a layman. You have to ask your Uncle Li, Li Gongda quickly said with a smile. Their ranks are similar. However, the Classics is in charge of a prefectural's governance, so the salary is slightly higher than the Counselor of Learning. Li Gongda slapped his forehead and the sound was very crisp. This slap was definitely not light and he had a look of realization. Look at Uncle Li's memory. Lingzhou's Classics Yang Qianli is not young anymore. Not long ago he was complaining to Uncle Li that his physical strength was not good, and he had the idea of retiring and returning to his hometown. Coincidentally, Uncle Li feels that Su Beiji should not be a Counselor of Learning. Being a Classics is very good. Lingzhou's governance can only be managed by Su Beiji so that Uncle Li can be at ease. Su Fengyan poured a full cup of wine for Li Gongda and himself. After drinking it in one gulp, he said with hazy drunk eyes, Uncle Li, you don't know. When Su Beiji was tricked by me to come to Beiliang, I promised him that he would become a high-ranking official. However, as for how high is considered a high-ranking official, I don't know anything about it. What Counselor of Learning? I estimate that he would only be around 6th or 7th rank. Isn't that the same as being a county magistrate in a lower prefecture? Even if Su Beiji does not mind being a low-ranking official, since nephew had boasted, I am afraid that I will break my promise. Furthermore, I shamelessly begged Su Xiao to be Lingzhou's general to show off. If Su Beiji becomes a Classics administrator, we will see each other all the time, and I will be embarrassed to drink wine with him. Uncle Li, don't you think so? Chapter 890. Liang officials, according to the law below grade 3, were not only split into main and secondary grades, but also into upper and lower grades. For example, although they were both grade 4, there were actually 4 grades. Capital officials and local officials, main officials, secondary officials and lower officials. There were many mysteries hidden within. To become an official, entering the lower grade was the first dragon gate. Regardless of whether one was a lower grade 9 official or not, the difference between the grades was like a chasm. The next grade 4 was the second dragon gate that was even harder to cross. Currently, most of the so-called nobles and ministers were above grade 4. To climb to this position, one had to rely on one's family background, luck, and ability. For example, the Song family's old and young masters, the father and son, had dominated the literary world for over 20 years. Among them, the young master was only a lower grade 3 Imperial College's right chancellor. Thus, even though Li Gongda was gentle and humble in front of Su Xiao, a sneeze from him in Lingzhou was enough to make those county governors tremble in fear. At this moment, Li Gongda still did not have the aura of a main grade 2 official. He nodded his head like a chicken pecking rice. Yes, that makes sense. Your Highness is a man of your words, so how can you go back on your words? If you want to blame someone, blame Uncle Li for not thinking it through. Currently there are still Lingzhou Huangnam County's county governor and Fengyu County's county governor, both of which are suitable for Su Beiji. Fengyu County is the biggest county in Beiliang. It has a special rank and is comparable to a county governor. It is also not far from our Lingzhou city. Su Fengyan suddenly yawned and put down his wine cup. He stood up and said with a lazy expression, Huangnam County's county governor Song Yan is in his prime and has a good reputation. As for the county governor, although Fengyu County is the biggest county in Beiliang, it doesn't sound good. Forget it, it will be the new year in a few days, so Uncle Li doesn't need to worry about this. I'm just a general in Lingzhou. If I keep talking about Lingzhou's government affairs, I'm afraid that the next time I visit, Uncle Li won't let me eat and drink. Li Gongda slapped his thigh heavily. Su Xiao and Su Fengyan both stood up. He did not dare to sit there arrogantly, so he quickly stood up and said softly, Your Highness, since Su Beiji was Longqing County Governor Chao, why don't you let him be the Lingzhou County Governor? Su Fengyan smiled. Let's talk about it later. As an important advisor to the head of a province, when the provincial governor was patrolling the territory, he could bring his own horse and carriage to accompany him. That was why he was called Bi Wei, and it could be said that he lived up to his name. As long as the county governor did not make a big mistake, half of the officials would be able to successfully become the county governor. Liang had 30 provinces under the Taoism. As the county governor's candidate, county governor was also an important official with a lot of power. No one would look down on them. Su Beiji jumped from a county governor to a county governor, which was equivalent to easily crossing the second dragon gate in the officialdom. Even the entire Bailiang Taoism would have to raise their eyebrows. But what made Li Gongda uneasy was that His Royal Highness was still in low spirits. He looked absent-minded and easy to talk to, but this made Li Gongda, who had always been in control of the situation, feel uncertain. Su Xiao did not let Li Gongda see him off. The governor knew the essence of flattery, so he did not disturb the peace of father and son leaving the manor together. After Su Xiao went around the screen wall, he smiled. Is it your appetite or Su Beiji's appetite that is big? Is he eyeing the position of county governor that Li Gongda is unwilling to let go? Normally, Li Gongda would not be so reluctant, but now that there were less than 1,000 scholars pouring into Bailiang, most of them would stay in Lingzhou. There were many things that the governor could not say, but there were many things that were more convenient for the county governor to do. This is called a county official is not as good as the one in charge. Even if Li Gongda had not realized what was going on with his eyesight, he would be able to quickly guess what you want. Father, let me say something more. Snakes have their ways, rats have their ways. In terms of military affairs in Bailiang, even if you make a fuss about a Huaihua general who has taken off his armor and returned to the fields, it is not a big deal. You can also be a Lingzhou general, but the circle of civil officials is big and small. They are all interconnected and even more intertwined. Just relying on fists cannot solve all the troublesome matters. This is also the root of why father has never liked to pay attention to local politics. Officialdom is Jianghu. Everyone has no choice. Officialdom is also not Jianghu. You can't just use force to convince people. Su Fengyin laughed softly. I know the severity of the matter. Actually, the governor of Huangnam County, Song Yan, is Li Gongda's favorite student. This official position is very sincere. If Su Beiji goes to Huangnan, even if Li Gongda's student does not support him, they will not cause trouble. However, Lingzhou is a joke. I know better than anyone that the governor is waiting for Hanlin to return home in glory. This position is simply tailor-made for my son. It is reasonable for him to become the county governor of Lingzhou in the future. If it were anyone else, even if it is Su Beiji who I think highly of, they are destined to not be successful. However, to be honest, whether Hanlin goes from joining the army to Lingzhou's deputy general and then to a general, or whether he goes down the path of a county magistrate instead of a county governor, I am happy to see it happen. No matter how unreasonable I am, how can I not have some selfishness towards Hanlin? Uncle Li, you are still a little petty. Su Xiao walked forward with a hunched back and smiled. The size of the situation is not fixed. After being promoted, one's field of vision will be broadened, which may be of help. However, it is still not as good as some people's natural situation. Li Gongda became the governor not because he is very capable, but because he is suitable for this position. Speaking of which, if Li Gongda was not petty, he would not be able to reach this step today. Speaking of this, father had to talk about his experience again. Many people might not be doing well at the moment, but you still have to be more patient. Not to mention others, just like father, he didn't have this kind of breadth of mind from the start. Before he joined the army, he was still fighting with the street thugs every day. After he became a lieutenant, he never thought that one day he would be on the same level as those high and mighty court elders. When he begged them for soldiers, horses, money and provisions, he still didn't have much face left. The only thing he didn't do was kneel down. The hardships I faced, even when I left Liaodong with those old brothers, father has never said anything about it. Su Fengyin nodded. Su Xiao laughed without warning and said happily, just now, I saw you and Li Gongda arguing over there, drinking and scheming against each other. Just thinking about it makes me happy. Su Fengyin rolled his eyes and sighed. He said self-mockingly, in the end, I still did not get the position of Lingzhou provincial governor. I was still worried about how to meet Su Beiji. Just now, I made a solemn vow and said bold words to this fellow. In the end, in the middle of winter, I turned around and poured a basin of cold water on my head. Su Xiao laughed even more happily. Why don't father go to Su Beiji's place to support you? Su Fengyin shook his head. Forget it. You go back to Liangzhou first. I will definitely rush back to eat New Year's Eve dinner. After the New Year and before the military exam at the border, I will obediently be the Lingzhou general who scares people. When Lingzhou is over, I will return to Qingliang Mountain. It should not take long. Su Xiao nodded and walked out of the Li residence. Su Xiao said with a playful smile, because of you, Li Fujian, that girl is hiding behind the projector wall. She doesn't even greet me when she sees me. Won't you turn around to take a look? Su Fengyin did not turn around. He sent Su Xiao to the carriage outside the residence and glared at him. Yuan Zuozong was riding a horse to protect him. Su Fengyan looked up and said, "Second brother Yuan, don't let Su Xiao drink too much. If he really wants to, let him drink 1 cup at most." It was rare for Yuan Zuozong to have the leisure to joke with a straight face. Wakinmei smiled and looked at the carriage. "Father, who should I listen to?" The old man in the carriage laughed. "You will listen to him in the future." Chapter 891. As soon as Su Xiao left, the surplus generals and captains of Lingzhou gradually gathered outside a mansion and handed over their letters to the general's gatekeeper. Most of the letters were made of expensive materials and were written in gold. One could not expect these rough men from the general's family to have any lofty and ancient style. On this street, the governor's mansion had the highest threshold. Logically speaking, it should have the most visitors, but the Lingzhou general's new mansion was full of people, which made people gasp in amazement. Inside the mansion, Su Fengyan was chatting with Su Beiji. Unexpectedly, when Su Beiji heard that he could not get an official position on Li Gongda's side, not only did he not find it strange, he even said that this was reasonable. Su Fengyan could not tell whether this fellow was praising him for being slippery or mocking him for being a fox relying on the tiger's might to get things done. However, since Su Beiji was not in a rush to become an official of the provincial governor, Su Fengyan took advantage of the situation and waited for the news happily. The housekeeper of the mansion, Jianghu, was an old member of the prince's mansion that had been transferred from Mount Qingliang to Lingzhou. He was middle-aged and had a dignified appearance. In the past, His Royal Highness had spent a lot of money to buy poetry and literature. The silver had all been handled by Jianghu, so he was very reliable in his work. At this moment, he jogged to the door of the study with a face full of joy and reported to the heir about the bustle outside the mansion. He held a large bag of name cards and scraped off the gold powder on them. It was probably enough for him to go to Lingzhou's Tiger Hill restaurant to eat and drink. Su Fengyan waved his hand at Jianghu and said, "Reject all of them. Just say that I won't see a single one of them." Jianghu bowed and made a sound of acknowledgement. He did not have any doubts and went back the way he came. He said that the Lingzhou general would not be seeing any guests today and then directly closed the gate of the mansion. He did not even let the side gate go. It was clear that there was no room for negotiation, and this made everyone give up completely. These martial artists who were tyrannical in Lingzhou were not very dejected when the gate was closed. They had originally called their friends and came in groups to join in on the fun. Who would really hope that the Lingzhou general who had only been there for a few days would give them a promotion? In the end, it was the identity of Beiliang's heir that made them have no choice but to lower themselves and drink the northwest wind this time. Furthermore, there was an unwritten rule in Beiliang's officialdom. Yuzhou was mostly Yan Wenwan's while most of Lingzhou was Zhong Hongwu's private backyard. The two sides had never interfered with each other. This group of people were mostly the old subordinates of General Huaihua. Some of the direct subordinates who were deeply indebted to General Zhong were not even willing to show their faces. For example, a few captains with real power under the deputy general all gathered around the stove to boil wine. They secretly cursed that this heir was too vicious. He had just destroyed General Zhong's face and he actually did not want to stop while he was ahead. He swaggered into Lingzhou and stepped on the old general's face that had already fallen to the ground. There were no young people who were as unparticular as him. They were all filled with righteous indignation, fighting for the old general's justice. One or two captains with bad tempers immediately slammed the table and stood up. A few of the more shrewd ones also had a dark expression as they drank wine. If they were asked to rebel against the Su family, they would not dare to even if they had 100 guts. However, after being immersed in the officialdom for the past few years, they had learned a lot of tricks. They slacked off when they encountered something and were able to do it easily. Furthermore, not only were they a group of martial artists, everyone present was also related to the civil officials of Lingzhou's officialdom by marriage. These old foxes who sat behind the official's desk were well aware of the rules and regulations. They did not even need to say anything angrily for the Lingzhou officialdom to operate properly. Most importantly, no one could find fault with it. Didn't you scholars from other places come to Lingzhou to steal rice bowls? The hatred of stealing someone's official hat was far greater than the hatred of stealing someone's love. After these military officers discussed and weighed the pros and cons, they all left with sinister smiles on their faces. Beiliang had a small number of scholars, so most of them were officials from humble backgrounds. This group of people actually did not lack intelligence, naturally keen on currying favor. If the high officials could be said to be the awe-inspiring king of hell on the stage, then this group of people were the even more difficult to deal with little ghosts guarding the door. If some of these officials had brilliant methods, They could even make the officials into mere figureheads, controlling the officialdom, making their superiors become mere decorations. When Jianghu governed the imperial court, one of his policies was to target the shortcomings of the officials, directly viewing them as a disaster that harmed the country's throne. However, Grand Secretary Zhang was publicly acknowledged to be good at governing the country, but when it came to dealing with the officials, there was no improvement. There were also many important officials in the imperial court who criticized and ridiculed him. In particular, some of the pillars of the imperial court who came from humble backgrounds even chose to watch from the sidelines. If the imperial court, where scholars made up the majority, was still in such a state, Bailiang naturally would not be able to escape this fate. As a result, Lingzhou, which was right at the end of the year, was quickly thrown into chaos. Documents gradually piled up, gangs fought in the streets, criminals killed each other in prison, the granaries of the government either caught fire for no reason or became moldy by a few inches. All kinds of trivial matters sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain. Forget about those county and county officials who were badly battered, afraid that they would not be able to have a peaceful year. Even the administrator Li Gongda began to feel tired dealing with it. Every day there were lower-level officials who came to complain. On the contrary, Huangnam County seemed like a crane in a flock of chickens, its political affairs large and small orderly. Longqing County was the complete opposite, its situation especially miserable, leaking air from all directions. It was rumored that Governor Zhong Qingxin personally took care of everything, busying himself to the point where he lit a lantern every night, so worried that he already had a few strands of white hair. Lingzhou's officialdom was a mess. The front of the Lingzhou general's manor was deserted, matching the cold winter season. A carriage silently drove out of Lingzhou's capital and headed toward Huangnam County. The coachman wore a short jacket made of yellow wolf skin. The more burly he was, the more shabby he seemed. No one would believe that he was the deputy general of Lingzhou. In the carriage, other than Su Fengyin, there was also the servant girl Huyan Guanyin. These days, Su Fengyin had been reading through the records of Lingzhou's officials in detail. There were many red circles and he did not pay much attention to this young girl who would have made it onto the rankings if she had come to Bailiang earlier. For this trip, when Su Fengyin crossed the threshold, he decided to have Zheng Fulu call her over to follow him out of the city. He did not know if it was because she was not acclimatized to the environment, but Huyan Guanyin was not as lively as she was when she was in a difficult situation on the grasslands. Her spirit was dim and she was not as spirited as before. Su Fengyin thought that after returning to Lingzhou, if he had the chance, he would send her to a safe and quiet place. It was better than being sick and slowly destroyed in a noble residence. Some women were either held tightly in the palm of one's hand or truly treasured. Instead, it was a waste of natural resources. Originally, if Huyan Guanyin could adapt to Bailiang, Su Fengyin would not mind keeping her by his side. It did not matter if he ate her or not. Looking at her was pleasing to the eye and was good for the eyes. Su Fengyin was not idle during this trip. He had a document on the background of a few important officials in Huangnam County. These densely packed and delicate small regular script were the painstaking efforts of the second-class servant girls in Wutangin after working through the night. Su Fengyin, who had been with them for many years, could tell at a glance which was written by the green ants and which was written by the cucumbers. Su Fengyin rubbed the space between his eyebrows and put down the stack of letters. After going through it in his mind, he lifted the curtain. The unique cold air of the cold land hit him in the face. Su Fengyin did not put down the curtain for a long time. After leaving the city, Huyan Guanyin was a little sleepy. She curled up in the corner of the carriage, unable to endure the drowsiness. She was slightly dozing off. When the wind blew, she suddenly woke up. She quietly looked at the side of his face and bit her thin lips. Her lips were bright red and glistening, making people mistakenly think that if she bit a little harder, a few drops of blood would come out. Su Fengyin saw that she was not used to the cold and quickly put down the curtain. He smiled warmly and said, "I couldn't sleep last night, so I wandered around aimlessly. I saw a pot of impatiens by the window of your room. It's clearly past the flowering period, so how could it still bloom in such a cold weather?" Chapter 892. Huyan Guanyin blinked and said softly, "When I first entered the manor, I saw a few flowers in the corners of the manor. They didn't look like they were grown in the manor, so I gathered my courage and planted one in a small pot. I didn't know it was called a balsamine flower, nor did I know it was in bloom." Su Fengyin nodded and smiled. "It's the same as the shusher that's causing trouble for me in Bailiang. It's not a first-class product. But don't look at it just because it looks delicate. It can grow anywhere. A poor place like Bailiang is no exception." Some women who can't afford to buy rouge and face powder like to use its flower juice to paint their nails in summer and autumn. It's very eye-catching. Although this kind of thing has been criticized as a cheap product by famous scholars in Jiangnan who worship chrysanthemums and peonies, and has been given the harsh nickname of a chrysanthemum maid, I feel that regardless of whether or not she's a chrysanthemum maid, she can be used for people to admire and paint their nails. That's already the best use of her. There are a lot of them in my house. They grow all over the ground. Other famous flowers can't even be stopped by trees. However, I've never seen them bloom in winter. Presumably, it's because no one was willing to plant them in a pot and bring them back to the house that you accidentally delayed the flowering. That's right, this balsamine flower is very sturdy. My second sister gave it a nickname, hot-tempered. Under the scorching sun, when the wind blows, or when you pinch it with your fingernails, the seeds will bounce far away. When I was young, every time I made my second sister angry, she would give me a black face and not say a word for days. I always liked to use my hot-tempered nature to flick her face. I'd rather have her scold me than ignore me. In the end, Su Fengyin saw Huyan Guanyin staring straight at him. Su Fengyin said awkwardly, "You didn't do anything wrong. How could I bear to scold you? Besides, I have a lot of things on hand right now and am very frustrated. It's not that I don't want to pay attention to you. I do know how to write the 4 characters anger and introspection, and my handwriting is not much worse than that of a famous calligrapher. It's a pity that I haven't been good at it and I often take my anger out on others. You haven't seen the scene of me getting angry with my father. When I was young and ignorant, as long as something didn't go my way, I would vent my anger on him. I could even take a broom and chase him for thousands of miles. But now that I think about it, even though I was childish, I didn't feel too guilty. Who asked him to be my father, the person closest to me? Right? Besides, at that time, his legs were very nimble and he ran very fast. Everyone else respectfully called him the king of Bailiang and the great general, but I called him the runaway general." Huyan Guanyin looked at him and grinned. That smile was as innocent as a child's. Huyan Guanyin lowered her eyes, not meeting his gaze. Su Fengyin saw her cowering timidly and mocked himself. Did he look like a criminal with the word, pervert, engraved on his forehead? He remembered that her entire tribe on the grasslands treated him like an immortal. How could he reveal his true colors so quickly? Su Fengyin collected his thoughts and lowered his head to continue picking up the letter on his knees. He quickly focused and gave Administrator Li a few days of time. It was probably because of the sudden wind and rain in Lingzhou's officialdom that Uncle Li was busy with government affairs and temporarily had no time to care about Su Beiji's promotion. Even though it was not to his liking, Su Fengyin was still willing to endure it. Back then, the Yin family had chosen a small path to escape Lingzhou. If he had not hinted to Su Xiao, Yan Jieshi might not have been able to leave Bailiang so smoothly. Su Fengyin warned himself not to be so soft-hearted in the future. Huangnam County was where Li Gongda had made his fortune. Even though Li Gongda's reputation as an official was not good, his ability to judge people was not small. It was natural for him to appoint people by favoritism. However, a few of his disciples were considered capable officials in Bailiang's officialdom. If it were not for these people helping Li Gongda gain face, Su Xiao would not have been so generous as to let Li Gongda become the administrator under one person just based on the relationship between the Li and Su families. The governor of Huangnam County, Song Yen, was one of the best. He did not have a prominent teacher and was self-taught. He was skilled in both magic and power. If it were not for the fact that he had many objections towards Su Xiao and could not help Li Gongda's other lackeys, he would not have stopped at being the governor of a county. This time, the reason why Li Gongda was so concerned and anxious was because Huangnam County was not normal. Normally, this would be a bright political achievement. However, with the new Lingzhou general in a quagmire, wouldn't Huangnam County become a dazzling bird out of the forest? His Royal Highness was not moving forward in the quagmire. What was going on with him, Song Yen, who was high up on a branch? Even if he did not make a sound, it would make people feel that he was being noisy. Li Gongda's heart ached for the Lingzhou provincial governor. He just had to act dumb. It was not a crime. He was just afraid that because of Huangnam County, he would be hated by His Royal Highness, who had walked in front of Bailiang for the first time. Su Fengyin let out a breath and narrowed his eyes in deep thought. If nothing unexpected happened, Song Yen must have received 1 or 2 well-meaning secret letters from the administrator, telling this disciple to quickly tarnish his reputation. The people under him were too good at conducting themselves. As officials, they did not even care about doing things. What a headache. Now, with Zhong Hongwu as an example, no one would be stupid enough to go head-to-head with him, the Lingzhou general. As a result, they would all use soft methods to avoid the sharp edge, which would make people feel even more disgusted. Su Beiji was also not loyal. He did not get the Lingzhou provincial governor position and returned to Longqing prefecture to watch the show. A copper coin that was no longer in circulation in the marketplace was slowly rolling between Su Fengnian's 5 fingers. Huyan Guanyin stared at the copper coin as it rolled back and forth, tediously, but she watched with great interest. It was to the point that when Su Fengnian raised his head to look at her, she did not notice. Su Fengnian put away the copper coin that the crown prince of Yanqi had returned to him and said softly, "Before New Year's Eve, I need to go back to Liangzhou. At that time you can leave Lingzhou with me. Do you want to go back to the Beimang grasslands or go to Jiangnan to take a look?" Huyan Guanyin seemed to have realized something and asked, "With you?" Su Fengnian could not help but laugh. "Of course it's you alone. How can I leave?" She blinked her eyes and lowered her head again. Su Fengnian stretched out his finger and knocked her head. He laughed angrily. "The entire officialdom in Lingzhou is working together to play dirty with me. What, are you using what you have learned? Do you believe that I will chase you off the carriage?" She raised her head. She was still silent. Su Fengnian had a flash of inspiration. He was stunned and asked softly, "You just want me to talk to you?" Huyan Guanyin's beautiful face turned red. Su Fengnian held his stomach and laughed. He stretched out his hand and pinched her delicate cheeks. He then said helplessly, "Should I say that you are stupid or stupid? You are so quiet. Of course, I thought that you were not happy by my side. That's why I wanted you to go to a place where you can be happy. You have to know that on the grasslands, you dared to take the initiative to enter the tiger's mouth and ride on my body. Look at now, you are so lifeless." She was shy and wanted to say something. Su Fengnian sighed and let her sit sideways on his lap. He put one hand around her round shoulder and rested his chin on her head. He continued to flip through the letters. "This is called a saint's calmness. It is really unreasonable that I can't become a land immortal in this lifetime." The woman who was sitting sideways leaned forward, her chest squeezing one of his arms. Su Fengnian did not pay much attention to it at first. He only thought that she was uncomfortable. However, when his arm felt her restlessness, he quickly realized that it was not strange that he could not become a land immortal. Su Fengnian put the stack of letters on the ground. He only picked up one of them. His other hand slid into her collar. There was only a thin layer of satin between them. He held a ball of smooth fullness. His 5 fingers sank slightly. Huyan Guanyin's head leaned back and rested on his arm that was holding the letter. Her charming eyes were like silk. She raised her head and looked at this guy. She was at a loss and faintly let out a delicate nasal sound. Su Fengnian's sanctimonious appearance made people's hair stand on end. He pretended to be calm. In order not to make a sound, the ignorant woman bit a slender finger. This natural charm was extremely alluring. Su Fengnian looked down and asked himself, "Why don't I stop thinking about becoming a land immortal today?" Chapter 893. The carriage slowly came to a stop. Su Fengnian let go of Huyan Guanyin, who looked like she had been fished out of a water tank, and bent down to lift the curtain. He saw 3 riders stop by the side of the road. They did not wear any armor and were dressed in Jianghu martial arts attire. They were very clean and neat. However, unlike Jianghu martial artists, they all had a Bailiang saber at their waists. One of the young riders was particularly outstanding. His face was like jade, and there was a small but sturdy leather pouch hanging from the back of the horse. When Su Fengnian saw these familiar faces, he smiled and jumped off the carriage, stomping his feet. The weather was cold and the ground was frozen. The road was hard and the ground was hard. When the 3 riders saw His Royal Highness get off the carriage, they hurriedly flipped over and dismounted. Su Fengnian waved his hand, indicating that they did not need to bother with these complicated formalities. The 3 riders were all from the White Horse Righteous faction of the Phoenix Battalion. In Bailiang they had vaguely become a small group of people with the most upright roots. Moreover, among the 3 Hong Shuwen had made a whole new level of respect during the battle at Iron Gate Pass. Wielding 2 sabers, he had killed 6 Imperial Guards and a golden saber Imperial bodyguard. The young rider, nicknamed His Royal Highness, was now Wang Zhi's deputy general. In name he held the official title of Changshui Commandant. Last time he had also shown his face at the Fish Dragon Gang in Longqing County. This time he was transferred to the general's mansion in Lingzhou. Su Fengnian remembered that when he asked Wang Zhi for him, Wang Zhi's heart ached so much that he trembled. His expression was as if his parents had died. Su Fengnian asked Hong Shuwen for his warhorse. This Changshui Commandant rode 1 horse with his fellow officers. 4 people, 3 riders and 1 carriage headed to Huangnam County. Su Fengnian smiled and asked, "Hong Shuwen, "Did Ningame teach you the short halberd?" Hong Shuwen, who always gave people the impression that he was a lone wolf in the desert, obediently held back a lot of his ruthlessness in front of His Royal Highness. He was actually a bit shy. He nodded and said, "General Ning said that I have some talent with the halberd. When I get used to the short halberd, he will teach me the big halberd." Su Fengnian didn't deliberately use words to win people over. After chatting for a while, he urged his horse forward. When it was close to noon, they arrived at a small border town in Huangnam County. They led the horse forward. There were many New Year's Eve markets in the town, where the people of the nearby villages came to buy New Year's goods. Some county officials took the opportunity to light candles and talk about good books, helping their parents to get closer to the people. However, the people of Bailiang were valiant, so they only treated this kind of thing as a lively joke. The actions of leaving the Yang and going to other provinces and counties to embellish the official's career were also quite solemn and respectful. Those who talked about good books had to wear plain clothes. In Bailiang there were suspicions that they were neither donkeys nor horses. Many officers who knew a little bit of literature and ink went up to the stage, and even some military officers who liked to be in the limelight rolled up their sleeves and went up to shake their heads. At this moment, Su Fengnian stood and watched from afar. Even though the inarticulate officials on the stage repeated the same old tune, they still made mistakes in their sentences. Some children with good memories who had long since memorized the words by heart started to make a fuss. When the children started to make a fuss, many adults around them also started to make a fuss. The officials lost face, so they glared and pointed their fingers, catching a man and scolding him. The man wasn't afraid of this little official's prestige and loudly cursed back. Then the man's wife also looked at him coquettishly and teased him a few times. The small official wasn't really angry, so he didn't filter his mouth and took the opportunity to tease the plump woman. However, the woman of Bailiang wasn't a thin-skinned lamp. A few bold and vulgar words made the small official's face turn red. In this kind of inappropriate noise, the rigid and pedantic talk about good books became a joyous occasion. Chapter 894. Su Fengnian looked around and had Hong Shuwen find a restaurant as long as it was clean. After lunch, they continued toward Huangnam County. Su Fengnian had bought a large marten hat for Huyan Guanyin at the last minute. It covered her forehead, brows, and eyes so that her beauty would not be too shocking. The three retainers who had infiltrated Bailiang's local officialdom after leaving the Phoenix Battalion never looked sideways, especially Hong Shuwen. From beginning to end, it was as if Huyan Guanyin did not exist. Mounting their horses again, they turned from the bazaar onto a branch of a relay road. Other than the division of Bailiang's relay roads into provinces, counties and counties on the surface, there were also a few hidden relay roads between many passes. Many of the seemingly cumbersome relay soldiers were supported with large amounts of money. If it were not for Bailiang's lack of financial resources, Su Xiao would have made a big move. At the insistence of Zhang Julu, the Liang imperial court poured their taxes into the belly of the northern border. South of Jiangnan, most of the relay roads had been reduced to varying degrees. Regarding this, Zhang Julu sternly reprimanded a few local officials who were heading to the capital. After the incident, he changed his views slightly and immediately returned to normal. In addition, compared to the relay roads, Zhang Julu wanted to personally arrest the horse administration. The Grand Secretary did not have 3 heads and 6 arms, so he really did not have the energy to personally deal with the matters of the relay roads. Furthermore, the Gu Party had controlled the Ministry of War for a full 18 years. Not only did Zhang Julu meddle with the horse administration, he also directly took away the shockingly lucrative horse administration. The entire Ministry of War had long had complaints in their hearts. As a result, the popular palm eunuch Sun Tonglu had made a trip to Bailiang and returned to the capital to talk all night about the affairs of Bailiang that he had seen with his own eyes. After he mentioned the relay roads, the emperor sank into deep thought and speechlessness for a long time. Su Fengnian did not whip his horse to gallop quickly. Bailiang's relay roads were developed under the iron hooves of the Baimang war horses. It was a double-edged sword that could ensure that the troops, horses and provisions could move quickly. At the same time, if the 350,000 border troops defeated the Bailiang cavalry, then they could cross the border in one spurt of energy. Without a doubt, the road to the south would be unimpeded. The reason the Zhao family had tolerated Su Xiao time and time again, even turning a blind eye to the salt and iron matter, and not making things too difficult for the water transport over the years, was not that they were not worried that Bailiang's door would open and bring disaster to the Central Plains. In the future, when Qin Jibao was enfeoffed as a prince and entered Shu, it was also because they did not think that Su Fengnian would be in charge of Bailiang's armaments. The court had prepared for the worst. In case the Su family in Beiliang could not support the northwest of the Zhao family, at least there was Qinjibao Shu land as a second line of defense. When one reached the level of Su Shao and Zhang Julu, conspiracies and machinations actually became meaningless. In the end, the one who had power still ruled the world. Su Fengyan waved his hand at Hong Shuwen and said, "Commandant Hong, today Beiliang has an abundance of meritorious and dishonorable officials. Not to mention lieutenants and commandants, there are even generals all over the streets. If I remember correctly, Beiliang and Liang share the same law. The civil and military official ranks and dishonorable official ranks add up to as many as 74 ranks. In addition to those scattered titles, there are simply too many to count. If one day I take back all of them or eliminate most of them, tell me what do you think will happen to Beiliang's officialdom?" Hong Shuwen hesitated for a moment. Su Fengyan laughed and said, "There's no harm in saying it directly." Hong Shuwen said in a low voice, "Your Highness, then our Beiliang will really become a pot of porridge. If the people at the rear are not stable, those who work for the generals at the border will all have families to feed and will also not be at peace." For example, in Hong Shuwen's family, father was conferred the rank of a 6th-rank cloud cavalry officer because of his military exploits. Second uncle has some knowledge and was also conferred the rank of a 6th-rank Confucian scholar, which is considered not too common in Beiliang. These titles with ranks but no official rank are only used to give face to the elders and old brothers when they gather. If they really want to use these things to make a profit or to plunder the land, they can't do it even if they want to. If they were taken away all of a sudden, the old fellows' hearts would turn cold. Furthermore, it would be even worse than losing a few thousand taels of silver. Your Highness, I dare to speak from the bottom of my heart. This time, I heard from the elders in my family that a few thousand scholars from other places have come. They are all here to steal the old Beiliang's rice bowl. This time, when I went to the Lingzhou General's manor from Longqing County, I also heard a lot of rumors. They are all unfavorable to your Highness." Su Fengyan nodded and said with a smile, "Many people are working together to fan the flames of evil and make the stove that is Lingzhou's officialdom very warm. I'm afraid there are still a lot of people who are conscientiously adding firewood to the stove. This year's end in Beiliang is very different from previous years. It really isn't cold at all." Hong Shuwen was a bit puzzled. His Royal Highness could still smile? Because Hong Shuwen was His Highness' close official, the local prestige of the Hong family did not join the crowd this time. They closed their doors and refused to receive guests. They did not care about disputes and were already isolated and alienated by many families who were originally on good terms with them. If he wanted Hong Shuwen to go into battle to kill the enemy, he would definitely not hesitate. Hong Shuwen always felt that men should shed their blood on the battlefield. Before he became a general that brought glory to his ancestors, he had already thought about where he would die on the battlefield. However, if he wanted to criticize the current situation, it would really be asking for his life. Since His Highness asked about this foul and disgraceful matter, this ruthless Hong who once dared to slap his concubine mother half to death in the family could only say what he wanted to say. Su Fengyan slowly said, "Prescribing the right medicine for the right illness has a difference in urgency. Hong Shuwen, let me tell you something first. I plan to set up 14 rank 5 captains based on the geography of Beiliang. Captains are named after the important passes in the territory. If nothing goes wrong, there will only be 3 in Lingzhou. Wang Ji will go to the Maikong mountain pass that borders western Shu to guard Lazikou. As for the other 2, one will be given to Han Laoshan, who is temporarily the deputy general of Lingzhou. The remaining one will be fought over by the entire Lingzhou. I don't believe that no smart people will take the bait for such a big piece of meat. As long as you become a captain, it means that you can stand out from the large group of captains who only deal with trivial matters. It would not be an exaggeration to call you a feudal lord. As long as someone is willing to lead an internal conflict, the following matters will be much easier to handle. Originally, I wanted to give Han Laoshan's position to you. However, you don't have much military achievements. After all, Han Laoshan has Su Zhao's banner behind him. He can convince people wherever he goes, but you can't. Therefore, I will put you in the Lingzhou General's manor to accumulate experience. Although I can't use a quick and decisive method to deal with the Lingzhou officialdom, if I don't see blood at all, it won't make sense. When the time comes, I will need you. Beiliang's local captains don't have many chances to kill people, so don't treat it lightly. In the future, when I leave Lingzhou, you will most likely have to help the new provincial governor Su Beiji. I believe you know my relationship with provincial governor Su Beiji. I believe you know about my relationship with provincial governor Su. I'll say the ugly words first. If anything happens to him, you, Hong Shuwen, won't be able to compensate for that head on your shoulder. Hong Shuwen subconsciously wiped his neck and chuckled. Anyway, I will do whatever your highness says without any objections. However, can I ask your highness for a favor? Su Fengyan laughed and scolded. Why are you the same as Wang Ji? If you have something to say it quickly. Hong Shuwen said softly, Your highness, in the future if there is a war at the border, you can't forget about Hong Shuwen. Su Fengyan asked, 20 years ago so many people joined the army because there was no peaceful life anywhere. They were all aiming for glory and wealth. If they took a gamble they might be able to get an official position. However, it's different now. Why did you, Hong Shuwen, give up being a stable official and insist on risking your life at the border? Is it very impressive to have your head tied to your belt? Or do you think that you can't be a high-ranking official on the ground? As long as Hong Shuwen grinned, he was naturally sinister. Hong Shuwen is different from others. I just can't get used to living a leisurely and happy life. Especially after hanging out with your highness, I feel uncomfortable if I don't kill people for a day. I would go to the brothel to find soft and tender women to have fun with. After I'm satisfied, I would feel sick of it and couldn't help but want to break their necks. I don't think this illness can be cured, so I can only go to the border and kill people. Su Fengyan smiled and didn't comment. In a time of peace the people slept. When they woke up, their homes were still there and people were still alive. They worked hard every day. If there were one or two good thoughts, then this was a good world. In the eyes of the people, Hong Shuwen was definitely not a good person. However, without people like Hong Shuwen and Li Hanlin, Beiliang's good world wouldn't last long. Chapter 895. Because this chapter has more than 6,000 words, it's a bit late. The next chapter is estimated to be around 7 in the morning. Huangnam County's Governor Song Yan's house was empty and sparse. There were few servants and it was cold and cheerless. In fact, this house was one of the top high-rise houses in Huangnam County. With Song Yan's family's wealth, it was impossible to live in it, let alone buy it. It was difficult to even rent it. However, because it was a haunted house that no one dared to take over, it fell into the hands of Song Yan, who had nothing to do with it. The previous head of the house was an old general who retired from the border and wanted to spend time with his grandchildren. He was the right-hand man of General Yen Wenwan. He was a meritorious general who could drink wine with the king of Beiliang when he was young. It was unknown why, on a snowy night, more than 70 people in the house were killed. Regardless of whether they were women or children, they were all beheaded. It was extremely tragic. Until now, it was still a big unsolved case on the streets of Beiliang. Some said that it was the work of Lulin bandits. Some said that it was the work of political opponents who still worked in the Beiliang Frontier Army. No matter what, the house, which was rumored to be empty every snowy night, was empty for many years. Later, Song Yan, who did not believe in ghosts and gods, became the head of Huangnam County. He did not do any water or land Taoist rites, nor did he set up any altars or rituals. He just moved into the house with his family and lived in peace these years. Although Song Yan admired the power of magic, he had another nickname that was related to Huang Lao, Kagan Taoist. The wife of the prefectural governor passed away early, leaving behind an unbetrothed only daughter called Song Huangmei. In Huangnam County she rode a horse and brandished her whip, carrying a saber and a bow. She was extremely valiant and formidable, not losing to the rangers of Beiliang. When Song Yan noticed that his daughter, who had always regarded applying rouge as the worst evil in the world, began to ask him for money, not to buy bows and arrows, but to secretly buy a lot of rouge and face powder. Song Yan had bumped into his daughter several times in the residence, but his daughter did not wipe her face clean. Song Yan was happy to see this and he never exposed his daughter's clumsy cover-up. The library of the prefectural governor's residence was adjacent to the garden. Song Yan held a book and quietly stood by the window. In the garden, his daughter and 2 maidservants who were as close as sisters were laughing and talking happily. Her voice was particularly crisp. Song Yan, who was almost middle-aged, smiled slightly. His daughter deliberately spoke so loudly, wasn't it to let the young man who had been standing outside the wall for more than an hour hear her? Song Yan had asked someone to investigate the young man's family background. He was born at the bottom of the market and was full of vigor. Therefore he relied on a mediocre sect in Huangnan County. In several gang fights, he fought at the risk of his life and became the direct disciple of a sect leader. He had been honed in the ways of the world for many years and treated people better than those arrogant disciples in Huangnan County. Song Yan once visited the young man incognito in his spare time and drank tea with him at the same table. They chatted casually for a while. The young man rarely pretended to say something shocking. He talked in a simple manner and had a good nature. Therefore Song Yan silently took a step back and let it be. Song Yin himself was not from an aristocratic family and he was born in a poor alley. Therefore he knew that it was not easy for a young man from a poor family to stand out. However, if this young man was a scholar, even if he had no hope of becoming an official, Song Yin would have invited him to the mansion and generously recognized him as his son-in-law. However, Song Yin did not think highly of this young man from a gang who licked blood on the blade. At most he would not oppose it. It was too difficult for him, the governor of Huangnan County, to take the initiative to show his goodwill. Therefore Song Yin did not think highly of this young man. Song Yin saw his daughter sneakily walk towards the wall of the courtyard, not forgetting to look around. It was clear that she was too thin-skinned and was afraid of being caught by her father. She also knew that her father was famous for his ability to see the big picture from small clues and was not easy to fool. Song Yin could only smile bitterly and retreat from the window to near the bookshelf. Song Yin placed the Taoist work, 5 Bugs, back to its original position on the bookshelf and sat back down on the mountain-like desk. There was a bronze incense burner on the desk that was used to burn incense to refresh the mind. Song Yin glanced at the 2 secret letters that had been sent from the administrator's residence one after another. His face was expressionless. He reached out and stroked the patterns on the bronze that implied exorcism. Song Yin closed his eyes and felt the burning sensation on his fingertips. He slowly withdrew his hand. He did not care about what his teacher, Li Gongda, had said in the letter. On the contrary, this amazing feat in Huangnam County was a sign that Song Yin was going to establish himself as a servant of the Li family. Following Li Gongda's high rise to 2nd rank, Song Yan's status also rose. However, 4th rank prefect was already the limit. Now that Beiliang had a change of dynasty, Song Yin knew that his impression of the king of Beiliang was very poor. If he did not do something now, he would not be able to advance in the officialdom for the next 10 or 20 years. One step late, one step late, one step late. Song Yin, who was in the prime of his life, was full of ambition. He did not want to follow behind others and eat the leftovers. However, right now, Song Yin was not sure if that Lingzhou general had the magnanimity to personally come and see him, this stubborn and smelly stone of officialdom, for his courage. Just as Song Yin was deep in thought, the sound of his daughter's shouts came from the garden outside the building. Song Yin helplessly stood up. This daughter of his did not have the slightest bit of femininity. How could she marry into a good family in the future? Song Yin did not respond. He walked down the stairs and took a detour to enter the garden through the back door. He saw that his teacher's daughter, Li Fujian, had actually rushed to Huangnam County. There was also an unfamiliar face beside her. With Song Yan's experience, he immediately guessed the identity of this person. It was the cold man that Li Fujian admired, Guo Fufeng. Song Yin did not have much of a good or bad impression of this person. Seeing his daughter, Song Huangmei, sizing up this man, Song Yin gave him a meaningful glance. Guo Fufeng, on the other hand, was very calm. He respectfully and reverently bowed deeply to Governor Song. Song Yin nodded with a smile and did not say anything. It could not be considered warm and polite. Even if this person became the administrator's son-in-law in the future, Song Yin still did not think highly of him. Furthermore, with Song Yan's status, even if Guo Fufeng rose step by step, if he wanted to stand side by side with Song Yin, it would take him at least 20 years of hard work. Li Fujian held on to Song Huangmei, who was a few years younger than her, but her expression was nervous. This was the first time she had brought Guo Fufeng to appear in front of her father's students. Others were fine, perhaps they would give her some face as the administrator's daughter, but Song Yin was known among the Li family students for being unreasonable. He was very afraid that the governor would directly order them to leave with a straight face. This time he had rushed to Huangnam County to meet Uncle Song in secret. Her father really had no choice. She did not know how Guo Fufeng had gotten the news and had talked to her for half a day, telling her many heartfelt good intentions. Only then did Li Fujian hesitantly bring him along to the Song manor. She had a good relationship with Song Huangmei since they were young. She had always been treated as a younger sister by this girl. Everyone knew that Governor Song doted on his daughter, and this girl also had a dark relationship with a Jianghu boy whose background was even worse than Guo Fufeng's. This was also the key reason why Li Fujian dared to have Guo Fufeng formally reveal himself, in Lingzhou's officialdom. However, thinking of this, Li Fujian had an indescribable sorrow that she had no one to talk to. When did she have to be so scheming? However, seeing that Uncle Song's expression was tranquil, and at the very least he did not speak ill of Guo Fufeng, Li Fujian was slightly relieved. The heartless Song Huangmei did not know why the fearless sister Li's palms were sweaty. The group of people went inside the house to sit around the stove. Song Huangmei used the excuse that she needed to scoop some charcoal and ran out of the house like a wisp of smoke. How could Song Yen not know that she was going to say goodbye to her sweetheart? He could not help but make a commotion of folding a chair and standing on top of the wall. Song Yen had just sat down when he received a few name cards from the steward. They were all scholars from Huangnam County who came to ask for advice on how to help the people. In reality, they were just here to pay their respects to the prefect so that they could get familiar with him. Song Yen let the steward return the letters and also gave back a few books from the library. These people did not get to see the books, but they came in high spirits and returned in high spirits. It was not uncommon for them to show off to their peers. Song Yen casually dealt with this small matter and looked at Li Fuzhen with a smile. Uncle Song's salary has been used to buy books. The house is almost full. It will be difficult to eat fish and meat here. Li Fuzhen had never been good at socializing, so she just smiled. Guo Fufeng did not want to be a foil and took the initiative to say, the scholars of the past dynasties loved books as much as their lives. They believed that borrowing books was like borrowing a wife. It was better to directly give books to people, just like how a famous scholar gave a beautiful concubine. It was passed down as a beautiful story. The prefect is well versed in the samadhi. Song Yen looked indifferent and turned a deaf ear. He did not agree. Guo Fufeng was thick-skinned and did not feel awkward at all. Li Fuzhen, who was slightly relieved, was a little restless again. She was afraid that Guo Fufeng did not know the rules and taboos of officialdom and would annoy the indifferent Song Yen. Fortunately, Song Huangmei brought a pot of black charcoal and helped her out. Song Huangmei spoke without restraint in her own home. She frowned and said, Father, Taya just told me that there were a few outsiders on the street outside the wall. They have been patient for some time. What are they doing in the empty alley in the middle of winter? Could they be bad people? Song Yen laughed softly and said, the road is open to the sky. Even if Father is the prefect, I can't control the footsteps of the pedestrians. Some people are willing to suffer the cold outside the wall. Even if they stay for a few hours, Father can't use the official's hat on my head to chase them away. Song Huangmei understood the meaning in her father's words. Her face suddenly turned red and she lowered her head to fiddle with the charcoal fire. Chapter 896. The housekeeper stood at the door in a panic. Song Yen got up and walked out of the room. After hearing the news, he did not say anything. He turned around and told Li Fuzhen that he had some urgent business to attend to. He then asked Song Huangmei to help take care of the guests. After the governor left in a hurry, his footsteps gradually disappeared. Guo Fufeng lowered his head and reached out to warm the charcoal. His face was a bit gloomy. Guo Fufeng raised his head to look at Li Fuzhen and the governor's daughter, who each had their own merits, whispering intimately to each other. Guo Fufeng's smile quickly turned into a warm one. He was not displeased by the governor's neglect of the governor. After Li Fuzhen and Song Huangmei were done talking about women's whispers, Li Fuzhen wanted to say something but stopped. She caught a glimpse of Guo Fufeng's look from the corner of her eye and said, Huangmei, do you know that there are many unethical and obscene temples in Huangnan County? Someone told my father about it. They said that not only did Uncle Song not ban it, but he allowed it to flourish. These temples were actually secretly manipulated by someone and became a means to amass wealth. It is a crime against public morals and morals. I came here this time to inform Uncle Song. Song Huangmei was shocked. She then narrowed her eyes and smiled. What do you mean by ruining public morals? Our Bailiang is like this. What is there to ruin? No matter how bad it is, it can't be that bad. I think those bastards who purposely slandered my father must have nothing better to do. Either they are afraid that my father's position is too stable and if my father doesn't move, they won't be able to climb up the ranks. If they don't get promoted, they won't be able to get rich. In the end, it's all because of money. I heard in the restaurant that a few counties in Lingzhou are pointing their spears at the Lingzhou general and purposely muddying the waters. Only our Huangnam County is peaceful. My father has become a target. Li Fuzhen's lips curled into a bitter smile. Guo Fufeng glanced at the girl and was a bit surprised. Song Huangmei glanced at the elegant Guo Fufeng from the corner of her eyes and said to Li Fuzhen, Sister, Brother Han Lin is really something now. He is so successful that he has become the leader of the crossbowmen in the upper reaches of the border. I heard that he has killed hundreds of Beimang barbarians. There are so many heads on the back of his horse that they cannot fit. Is Brother Hanlin coming home for the new year this year? If he comes back, please remember to invite him to my house. I have to tell Brother Hanlin about my endless admiration for him. Men have to be like Brother Hanlin and go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. Otherwise they are not men. Hearing these words, Guo Fufeng sneered in his heart, but his face remained calm. Li Fuzhen carefully glanced at Guo Fufeng, then turned his head and forced a smile. Let's go out for a walk. Guo Fufeng naturally stayed behind. After the two sisters left, Li Fuzhen reached out and pinched Song Huangmei's ear. Stupid girl, you dare to lecture your sister? Didn't I clearly write in your letter that you should not give him a dirty face? Look at you. Song Huangmei curled her lips and said, anyway, I didn't like that person at first sight. My father said that a scholar shouldn't be too enslaved and jealous. Such a scholar won't have a great future. I think the man surnamed Guo is not lacking in either of these two problems. Sister, listen to me. You refused our Northern Liang devil incarnate at that time, which was such a great feat to vent your anger. Why are you becoming more and more useless in the end? If I had known it would be like this, it would have been better to follow the lecher surnamed Su and become the concubine of the king of Fan in the future. Our administrator will be grinning from ear to ear. Besides, Brother Hanlin was able to turn over a new leaf. Maybe one day that Su guy will suddenly wake up and really go to the border to kill the enemy. Of course, I think that with that guy's nature, it is as difficult as ascending to the heavens for him to kill people with his own hands like Brother Hanlin. He only dares to bully women. I really don't know what those people who say good things about him are thinking. What Beiliang soldiers sent to the capital? What Beimang soldiers? What Beimang soldiers? What Liang Lake? Who would believe that? Li Fuzhen knocked hard on the forehead of the chattering Song Huangmei and angrily glared at her. No one will think you are mute if you don't talk. The two walked to the corner and saw a group of people walking quietly on the bluestone path of the mansion in the distance. Except for the prefect Song Yen who was wearing official uniform without a sword, most of the other men had eye-catching Beiliang swords hanging on their waists, which added a bit of a cold winter atmosphere. Song Huangmei, who liked to join in the fun, quickly pulled Li Fuzhen's sleeve and said in surprise, "Hey, who is this handsome guy with gray hair and murderous aura? Sister Fuzhen, look, my father is such a proud person. When he walks, he is actually one shoulder away from him. No, I have to find an excuse to pay a visit to this hero." Li Fuzhen's expression was complicated and obscure. In the end, Song Huangmei still had some loyalty. She did not leave her sister Fuzhen alone. She was different from the ordinary girls from the noble families. Since young, she was obsessed with playing with guns and sticks. In order to secretly keep a Beiliang sword, she had been nagging her father for many years. In the end, Song Yen had to agree to give her one when she got married. This was because there was an iron law in Beiliang. As long as one was out of the army, even a general was not allowed to secretly wear a Beiliang sword. Even if one was bestowed one was not allowed to take it out. Of course, whether one abided by the law or not was another matter. Many playboys in Beiliang were proud of wearing a cold sword. As long as they were not exposed or seen, most of them would be fine. However, there was a world of difference between carrying a sword privately and carrying one openly. So far, no civil official in Beiliang was qualified to carry a Beiliang sword. This was like the honor of carrying a sword in the palace in the capital. Even though Song Huangmei was the daughter of the prefect, she still admired those soldiers who relied on their own ability to carry a northern cold saber. The disciple of the gang that she fell in love with also swore to her that in the future, before he married her, he would carry a northern cold saber and visit his father-in-law's house to propose marriage. Chapter 897. Song Yin led these uninvited guests into the meeting room at the back of the house. He dismissed the servants and personally poured tea for them. He was very polite, but there was not a hint of fear on his face. Even if the young man sitting in front of him was His Royal Highness of Beiliang and was the new Lingzhou general who had appeared out of nowhere. Su Fengyin took the teacup and said calmly, "Back then, Beimang's Jianghu wanted to infiltrate Beiliang under the orders of Spider Web Li Mibi. They specifically targeted the weak civil servants and used this to disrupt Beiliang's foundation. In the end, before they could even enter the country, they were all killed at the border. However, there were still some who managed to slip through the net and sneak into Yu and Liang provinces. At that time, to appease the people, many of the incidents were covered up. Lingzhou was relatively better, but the tragedy in this mansion still happened. Over the years, Beiliang's spies have mostly focused on Beimang's men of sacrifice. Every now and then, there would be a seemingly random murder case, but the people did not know about it." Song Yin smiled. "Last year there was a murder case in Huangnam County. It startled a group of cavalry from another county to cross the border to kill. They uprooted a gang and almost killed the entire family. At that time, I did not know the secret behind it and almost wanted to personally stop it and demand an explanation from that famous school's commander. Later, a spy under General Chu sent me a military order. Only then did I know the danger." Su Fengyin said, "Huangnam County is known as Jiangnan beyond the Great Wall. It is where Bailiang's granary is located. As the granary of our Lingzhou, Sir Song must have a heavy responsibility on your shoulders. Song Yan's tone was calm as he replied, "It is my duty." Su Fengnian sneered and said, "It is also the duty of the prefectural governor to forbid all unsuitable offerings in the county. Lord Song has always been known to be swift and decisive in Lingzhou. How is he neglecting his duty?" There were 3 ghost temples in Huangnam County, and the memorial tablets enshrined there were neither the souls of Bailiang heroes nor the gods conferred titles by the imperial court. It was obvious that this was against the etiquette system. However, one of the couplets was written by Lord Song. Could it be that Lord Song was relying on the protection of the administrator to knowingly violate the rules? I've heard that Lord Song is fond of collecting books. You've collected more than 60 unique ancient books and they're quite expensive. I wonder how many incense offerings did that illegal temple give to Lord Song this year? Song Yen drank a mouthful of tea and said, "It's only 500 taels, not worth mentioning. There were many rare books that were coveted but they were not able to get them. It is a pity." Su Fengnian smiled. "Excessive offerings in the territory, embezzling more than 300 taels, the punishment for these 2 crimes is the death penalty. Does Lord Song want to use your head to help me establish my prestige in Lingzhou?" Song Yen was indeed the smelly and hard rock in the latrine pit of Lingzhou. He actually smiled, "Since your highness has brought a knife and I have admitted my crimes, then it's just a matter of 1 knife." Su Fengnian put down the teacup. "You and I both know that you have disobeyed the wishes of the administrator. You want to come out of the Lingzhou officialdom so that I can take note of you, the person who once angered Su Xiao. As long as you're willing to start an uprising in Huangnan County and let outsiders misunderstand that the administrator has made up his mind to lower his head to the general of Lingzhou, many officials would tactfully restrain their petty actions. After all, if they were really dealt with later, those who came up with the idea would clean their hands and feet while those who did the dirty work themselves would have to bear the consequences. Although the law did not punish the majority who did not know how to punish the majority. After all, there would always be a few unlucky chickens that would be picked out. In fact, these crafty and slippery petty officials were also afraid of the consequences from the bottom of their hearts. Song Yen, do you think that without your Huangnam County I will be stuck in the mud? Even if I go ashore, I will be covered in mud and can only run to Liangzhou to complain to Su Xiao?" Song Yen shook his head. "Your Highness does not lack methods to break out of the situation, you just lack time. After all, even if your Highness kills randomly, you will be able to kill until they are not convinced. In the future, when the military confidants are all in place and some local officials and scholars from Lingzhou keep each other in check, the Lingzhou officialdom will slowly be tamed. However, your Highness does not seem to have such ruthlessness and decisiveness, and you cannot wait. On this point, after your Highness personally came to Huangnam County to find me, Song Yen was even more certain." Seeing that Su Fengnian did not speak, Song Yen continued to speak slowly. "If I become the Lingzhou provincial governor, I can be a vanguard for your Highness to get rid of the filth and also appease the administrator on the surface. Both sides will have a way out and I can secretly weaken Sir Li's control in Lingzhou." Su Fengnian smiled and planned on what the prefectural governor would say. "Prefectural governor, you overestimate yourself. The provincial governor of Lingzhou can only be Su Beiji, not you, Song Yen. At most, you can only be the governor of Lingzhou. However, I can tell you something straightforward. When Su Beiji becomes the administrator of Bailiang, you have hopes of becoming the Lingzhou provincial governor. However, that is still too early and you will have to wait. This is because Bailiang will not touch Sir Li, who has done meritorious deeds without any mistakes. The Su and Li families have accumulated 2 generations of incense. Not to mention Sir Li's hard work, just my relationship with Li Hanlin is enough for the administrator to enjoy being an official. Furthermore, it is better to not do something as immoral as killing the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness. Of course, if you, Song Yen, really have the ability with Su Beiji in front of you, even if you can't become the Lingzhou provincial governor, there are still 2 provincial governor seats for me to consider. There are 30 provinces in Liyang. Let's not talk about Su Beiji, who is an anomaly. Count them, how many of them are under 40? Sir Song, you should be content." Song Yan's expression was uncertain. In the end, Su Fengnian said something that made Song Yan not know whether to laugh or cry. "Also, there are many people who want to be promoted to Lingzhou provincial governor. If you, Song Yan, want to be promoted, you have to give me half of the books in the building. Many scholars have come to Bailiang and I can use them to buy people's hearts." Without waiting for the governor to nod, Su Fengnian stood up and muttered to himself, "Motherf ****, no wonder so many people want to be the emperor. They can be so righteous when they are selling their positions for money. Chapter 898. It was probably because this self-proclaimed Lingzhou general was too direct that Song Yan, who had been immersed in officialdom for many years, found it refreshing. At the same time, he also felt a fear that the governor did not want to admit. For a moment he was speechless and did not make a sound. The tea had already turned cold, but Song Yan still sat there and swirled the cup lid. Su Fengyan did not care about this kind of harmless rudeness. There was a secret report that Li Fuzhen had also come to Huangnam County. He did not want to meet her. If that happened, it would be difficult for both sides, so he prepared to leave this manor that was indeed filled with a gloomy aura. Song Yan was not so conceited that he would not move from his chair. He stood up and sent him to the door. Su Fengyan told him that he would stay in the county capital until tomorrow morning. Song Yan nodded his head and stood in place for a long time before walking back to the chair with heavy steps. He gently pressed one hand on the armrest of the iron pearwood chair. The steward who had been rejected by the honored guest of the manor carefully stood at the door. He could not help but be worried. Everyone knew that the heir of Bailiang was a strange and absurd person. Now that he had placed the title of Lingzhou general on his head, who knew if he was going to openly attack Lingzhou? His master had better not be the first. Song Yan patted the armrest and turned around to say, "Go to Wild Ape House and organize 2,000 books. Then have General Tao send them to the Lingzhou general's manor today." The steward could not help but ask, "Master, how will you divide them?" Song Yan's face was filled with helplessness as if salt had been poured onto his wound. He sighed and said, "Other than the 40 or so rare books that are kept in yellow rosewood boxes, choose the best ones and move them out of Wild Ape House." The steward made a sound of acknowledgement and quickly left. Song Yan rubbed his forehead and said with a bitter smile, "It really is more painful than marrying off a daughter." Su Fengyan brought Su Yanbing and Hong Shuwen along the small path of the Song Manor. Huyen Guanyin did not enter the manor and remained in the carriage outside the manor. The reason why Su Fengyan chose Huangnam County Song Yan was mainly because this prefect was quite knowledgeable, but he did not have the temperament of an old scholar. Back then, Song Yan had purposely criticized Su Zhao's unclear rewards and punishments in public. It was just a ploy in the officialdom to attract Su Zhao's attention. It was not really Song Yan who did not understand the rules of the officialdom. It was a pity that he met Su Xiao, the king of Bailiang, who did not know how to read the customs. Of course, Su Fengyan also began to suspect that Su Xiao had intentionally left this stubborn Lingzhou rock for him to subdue. While Su Fengyan was thinking, he raised his head and saw a tall servant girl from the manor. She was dressed simply and strangely had a long sword at her waist. She had an unfriendly expression towards them. After she blocked their path, she pressed down on the hilt of her sword and asked sternly, "Who are you? You had bad intentions on the street outside earlier. Why did you barge into the backyard without permission?" Young people who did not wear armor but carried cold swords in Lingzhou were definitely those hedonistic sons who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. She had followed the young miss and taught them a lesson countless times. These wastrels who only knew how to rely on their parents' achievements to do evil did not have any memory at all. This time they actually dared to barge into the prefectural governor's manor to show off. Su Fengyan glanced at her. Hong Shuwen behind him was eager to try. His eyes were dark and cold and he was about to use the scabbard to knock this girl unconscious. Su Fengyan threw a look at Hong Shuwen, indicating that he should not cause trouble. He smiled and explained to her, "I am a guest of your manor. The carriage is parked at the back door and I am about to leave. It is not what you think. Barging into an official's manor is not a small crime. I do not have the courage to come to the prefectural governor's manor to cause trouble." Su Fengyan finished speaking and was about to walk around her. He did not expect her to take 2 steps to the side and block his path again. Hong Shuwen rolled his eyes. This girl really did not know how the word death was written. The maidservant said stiffly, "No, you have to tell me your name. I'll ask the steward and only after I confirm that there's no mistake will I let you go. Otherwise, if you're a daring book thief or a bandit who intends to commit murder," Hong Shuwen could not help but scold, "Scram." The maidservant, whose temper was not much better than Hong Shuwen's, was furious and wanted to draw her sword. However, what scared her out of her wits was that no matter how much strength she used, her sword could not leave the scabbard. It was as if it was nailed to the scabbard. Su Fengyan knew that Hong Shuwen did not have this ability, but to Su Yanbing who had once suppressed Wang Xiu, it was just a small trick. Su Fengyan directly brushed past her. Su Yanbing, who was as calm as an ancient well, followed closely behind. Hong Shuwen had a mischievous expression on his face as he swaggered past her. The maidservant, who had practiced swordsmanship for many years, only thought that she had seen a ghost in broad daylight. She did not dare to be rash and turned her head to look at the three people in a daze. Only when she found that they had shadows did she breathe a sigh of relief. She was really afraid that they were the wandering ghosts who had died tragically in this mansion. The maidservant no longer dared to move, but there was someone in the mansion who was still lingering around. His sword was like a rainbow as it flew straight towards them. Su Fengyan frowned. Hong Shuwen was happy that someone had bumped into his blade. However, with His Highness present, he did not act too ruthlessly. He quickly took out his blade and used the scabbard to stab the assassin's chest. Then he kicked the man's abdomen. Hong Shuwen seemed to feel that he had let the man off easy. He quickly walked over and was about to fiercely step on the assassin's face when Su Fengyan spoke. "That's enough." Hong Shuwen took back his boots that were only an inch away from the man's face. He put on his Baoyang blade again and turned around to walk towards His Royal Highness who had a bodhisattva's heart. The maidservant who had previously failed to draw her sword cried out with a sobbing tone, "Miss." The maidservant, who had been poked and stepped on by Hong Shuwen, struggled to sit up. She pointed at the fallen sword to the maidservant. Then she shouted towards the backs of the three people with difficulty, "Hey hey hey, the one with gray hair, don't be in a hurry to leave. I have something to ask you." Chapter 899. But to Song Huangmei's disappointment, that guy just left without looking back. She didn't know if he was afraid that her father would help her vent her anger, or he just didn't want to talk to her. But Song Huangmei, who had the spirit of the Jianghu, didn't have the thought of being unforgiving. She was in the wrong to use her sword to keep them, and she didn't think that the other party was unreasonable. Song Huangmei's skill was inferior and she was convinced. Although Song Huangmei's face was pale from the pain, her curiosity was far greater than her anger. But the maid Iron Cliff was not so open-minded. She helped the young miss pick up the long sword, and after helping the young miss stand up, she knew that she was not the opponent of that group of people, but she still wanted to fight. Song Huangmei grabbed her arm and squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. "Iron Cliff, don't go. They are really guests of the house and my father personally welcomed them." "Ouch, it hurts, I can't talk anymore." The maid Iron Cliff cried, "Young miss, how can there be such guests? I have to reason with the master." Song Huangmei, on the other hand, sucked in a breath of cold air and smiled with satisfaction. "Iron Cliff, we finally met a master. Go go go, help me to Sister Fusion. After I catch my breath I will ask my father who that guy is." Su Fengyan walked to the front of the carriage and said to Hong Shuwen, "Huangnam County has a few Beimeng spies that have been rooted here for many years. Seeing that you have nothing to do, you can go and work with our spies tonight, but we won't record your military merits. Remember, you have to follow their rules. If I know that you killed people, don't think about getting involved in this kind of thing in the future." Hong Shuwen nodded vigorously, his eyes were burning, and he licked the corner of his mouth with a smile that was terrifying. Guo Fufeng sat alone in front of the brazier in the room. He did not feel that he was being looked down upon. He even had the leisure to look at the decorations in the room. If he did not have such shrewdness and broad-mindedness, how could he have made Li Fujian, one of the few wealthy women in Baoyang, fall in love with him? Guo Fufeng was not dissatisfied with his current situation. Guo Fufeng believed that his plan was flawless. If his brother-in-law Li Hanlin continued to be an unruly hedonist, it would be fine. Guo Fufeng had never been a rigid scholar and did not mind helping Li Hanlin do evil. Now that Li Hanlin had joined the border, it was even better. In the future, when Li Hanlin returned to his hometown with glory, he would most likely take the path of a military official. A family also had to walk on two legs. Wouldn't the path of a civil official be filled by him, the virtuous son-in-law of the Li family? The two of them helped each other. With Li Gongda, who had only been the administrator for less than 2 years, guiding him, the Li family would naturally be prosperous. Guo Fufeng even thought of the scene where he would meet the new Prince Liang in the future. Now what was a little disdain? Even Li Fujian did not know that two officials highly regarded by the administrator had approached Guo Fufeng in private. They were just short of calling each other brothers. Guo Fufeng narrowed his eyes and looked at the charcoal fire in the brazier. This trip to Huangnam County was a secret. Li Fujian was thin-skinned and inarticulate. He still needed to rely on him to solve his father-in-law's problems. Huangnam County was the place of prosperity for the administrator. If there was a fire in the backyard, it would be a topic of ridicule in the prince's household. Guo Fufeng believed that Song Yan knew the severity of the situation. Previously he was neither cold nor warm to him. Li Fujian sat down beside him. Guo Fufeng saw that there was no one around and said softly, "I have my own plans on how to persuade Sir Song. Fujian, you don't have to worry. Also, according to what you said, the man that Miss Song likes is a disciple of a second-rate gang in Huangnam County. If there's a chance, the four of us can find an elegant restaurant to have a meal. Although I'm not a member of the Jianghu, I know a lot of Jianghu stories. I'm not afraid to have nothing to say to that person. Li Fuzhen suddenly asked, Fufeng, aren't you tired? Guo Fufeng smiled and asked back, tired? Li Fuzhen turned her head and did not look at him. Guo Fufeng hesitated for a moment and did not hold her hand. He placed his hands on the brazier and enjoyed the warmth. His voice was warm as he said, there's nothing to be tired about. In order for us to have comfortable days in the future, it's natural for me to be tired. One day I will let Ling Zhou and even Beiliang remember the name Guo Fufeng. Li Fuzhen did not feel tired when she went on a hunger strike with her parents in order to be with him. She did not know why, but when she heard the bold words of the man she admired, she felt tired. Guo Fufeng said softly, Fuzhen, don't worry. Sooner or later, I will let your father and Hanlin acknowledge me. Li Fuzhen nodded her head. Song Huangmei held his chest with one hand and his abdomen with the other. He entered the room and sat down. Li Fuzhen asked worriedly, what's wrong? Song Huangmei said mysteriously, it's nothing. Didn't we see those people full of killing intent earlier? I personally went to test them. Guess what, I was taught a lesson by them. That's nothing. What happened to Iron Cliff was strange. They were not even able to draw their swords. Those people are definitely experts. Li Fuzhen asked with a panicked expression, does your father know about this? Song Huangmei shook his head and said, not yet. When I'm not in such a sorry state, I'll go and ask. Otherwise, my father will definitely ground me for half a month. I might not even be able to go to the lantern market. Li Fuzhen, who wanted to continue hiding the truth, grabbed Song Huangmei's hand and blurted out, the person in the lead is surnamed Su. He's the current general of Lingzhou. Song Huangmei was dumbfounded. He then shook his head and smiled, no way. Where did Su get his killing intent from? Even if he wears a Beiliang sword, he's just an embroidered pillow. Impossible. If that person is Su Fengyin, then I'm a female sword immortal. Song Yin stood behind the three of them and inadvertently heard this. For the first time he was furious at his daughter. He said angrily, Song Huangmei, fine. You're a female sword immortal, right? You'll be grounded for a year. If you dare to go out, I'll break your legs. This time I'll do what I say. Song Huangmei shrunk her neck and asked softly, Father, is it really that Su guy? Song Yin said sternly, what Su guy? It's His Royal Highness. It was the first time Song Huangmei saw her father scold someone with such a stern face. She did not even feel wronged when she was beaten by Hong Shuwen. Now she was so wronged that tears welled up in her eyes. She sobbed and shouted angrily, it's that Su guy. Even if he's standing in front of me, I'll still call him Su. He's an ignorant and incompetent second generation. If he wasn't born into a good family and followed the general's surname Su, then what is he, Su Fengyin? Outside the door, the housekeeper of the Song residence wished he could dig a hole and hide in it. He swallowed his saliva and turned his neck stiffly. He looked at the Su guy, who had left and returned. He did not know how to fix the situation for his young miss. Song Yin saw his daughter suddenly stop crying. He realized the change behind him. After he turned around, even the governor who had experienced the storms of officialdom felt his heart turn to ashes. Chapter 900. Li Fuzhen closed her eyes as if she did not dare to face the disaster of the Song family. Su Fengyin's expression was calm, and one could not tell if he was happy, angry, or sad. He said to Song Yin, Official Song, I have something to discuss with you. After saying that, Su Fengyin turns around and walks down the stairs. Song Yin was angry with Song Huangmei before. In the face of a disaster, he quietly presses his hand to his daughter who causes trouble from her mouth. He tries his best to squeeze out a smile, indicating that she should not panic. Turning around and stepping over the threshold, Song Yin let out a long breath, which was a bit cold. He quickly followed the Lingzhou general. Song Yin had been in a high position for a long time, and his understanding of shrewdness was much deeper than ordinary people who did not have to worry about food and clothing. Many of the sons of Zhenliang were not evil people who bullied men and women. Normally they would greet and send off people, and when dealing with officials like Song Yin who held real power, they would be very gentle and polite. When dealing with subordinates, they would also have the ability to control people. They would pretend to be profound, and their words and actions were strange, making people afraid. However, in Song Yan's eyes, this kind of shrewdness was not a high realm. They would not be moved by interests, and they would not be affected by the ways of the world. No matter how big or small, they would be able to remain calm. This was the true shrewdness. Song Yin was afraid that Su Fengyin was the former. When things were going well, he was easy to talk to, and when doing business with people, he would be fair. However, if things did not go his way, he would show his fangs and not treat people as people. Song Yin did not think that a governor of Huangnam County could make His Royal Highness, who was Bailiang, angry and not have any scruples in doing things. Su Fengyin slowed down his steps and walked side by side with Song Yin. He softly joked, "In the past you scolded Su Xiao and now your daughter scolded me. Does the Song family have a grudge with the Su family?" Song Yin was a bit embarrassed. Su Fengyin smiled and said, "I came back this time to tell you that your daughter and a maidservant tried to stop me from leaving the manor and suffered a little. The Song family is in the wrong for this matter, but I'm afraid that when a woman holds a grudge, she will be unreasonable and talk nonsense. This will cause the governor to hold a grudge against me, so I felt the need to come back and make things clear. However, if it was just this matter, I wouldn't have bothered to make a big fuss about it. The main thing is that there are several Beimang thieves' lairs in Huangnam County that have been hidden for many years. This time, a large number of scholars are going to die, and there are many spies and men of sacrifice in disguise. Even some Beimang spies who were originally rooted in the Central Plains have begun to take the opportunity to infiltrate Bailiang. Tonight, someone will clean up Huangnam County. I will leave tomorrow morning, so I felt that I needed to inform you in advance so that you won't be flustered when the time comes." When I returned to the residence, I saw that the Wild Ape House had started moving books. Song Yin didn't dare to form a grudge with the young man next to him. He didn't care about etiquette and directly asked, "Your Highness, are you really not angry at my daughter's rudeness?" Su Fengyin asked in return, "Scolding people in my own home is better than those people who stab me in the back in Lingzhou. I can still endure the latter and haven't made a move until now. What are you worried about? If you really feel guilty, then give me another 500 books from the Wild Ape House's collection." Song Yin sighed and said, "It was me who measured the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain." Su Fengyin said self-deprecatingly, "What kind of gentleman am I? You guys once bitten, twice shy. Based on my bad reputation in Bailiang?" Song Yin suddenly turned his head and saw the administrator's daughter hurriedly running over. She stopped and looked at them without any intention of leaving. Su Fengyin hesitated for a moment and said softly, "Sir Song, I want to say a few words to Miss Li. Go to the back door and wait for a moment." Song Yin nodded and left with quick steps. Li Fuzhen didn't take another step forward. With a cold expression, she asked, "What do you want to do to the Song family?" Su Fengyin didn't beat around the bush with her. "You actually want to ask me what I plan to do to Song Huangmei, right? Don't worry, Li Fuzhen interrupted Su Fengyin's words and said with a cold smile, "Do you really believe that I can be at ease?" Su Fengyin said calmly, "Li Fuzhen, if I remember correctly, I don't owe you anything." Li Fuzhen gritted her teeth and said, "If something happens to Hanlin at the border, I will hate you for the rest of my life." Su Fengyin turned to leave, but he was stopped by Song Huangmei. However, the swordswoman learned her lesson this time and said timidly, "Your Highness, I will take responsibility for my own actions. Don't make things difficult for my father." Su Fengyin reached out and pinched her cheek. "You scolded me and I took advantage of you. Let's call it even." Song Huangmei was stunned on the spot. After a long time she came back to her senses. She jumped up and ran toward Li Fuzhen, chirping like a bird. "Sister Fuzhen, did you see that? His Highness really has a murderous aura. He took advantage of me, but I didn't even dare to move. If it were a normal lecher, I would have chopped off his dog's paw. Sister, you don't know, but the two retainers by his side are very powerful. I've always said that a man with a cold blade is considered handsome. Sigh, now I feel that most of the rumors are true. Sister Fuzhen, you don't practice martial arts or swordsmanship, so you don't know that there is a saying in Jianghu that His Royal Highness is definitely an expert. I just don't know if he can fly on a sword and make a sound." Su Fengyin came to the back door of the mansion. Song Yin asked softly, "Do you need me to do anything to clean up Huangnam County tonight?" Su Fengyin shook his head and said, "No need." Song Yin said, "If your Highness doesn't mind this mansion's lifeless atmosphere, you might as well stay here." Su Fengyin smiled and said, "Why? Are you afraid that I will suddenly die in Huangnam County?" Song Yin, whose thoughts were exposed, laughed. Su Fengyin didn't let Song Yin see him out. He sat in the carriage and quietly drove out of the alley. Su Yambing drove the carriage to a private mansion located in the southwest corner of the county. Su Fengyin pushed the door and entered. The small courtyard was narrow. On the cold floor there were more than 20 people kneeling. Su Fengnian crossed his fingers and laughed at himself in his heart. Finally he felt a little like His Royal Highness. He said a few words and stood up. These 20 or so people wore different clothes. Some wore the brocade and marten coats of the rich, while others wore the rough hemp clothes of the countryside. There was even someone who wore a jade pendant that matched the official's uniform. Su Fengnian walked over and pulled off the jade pendant. The official wasn't low either. He was a lower 9th rank official. After stealing it, he didn't rush to return the jade pendant. The leader was an average-looking woman. As soon as she stood up, she knelt down again. With an involuntary trembling voice, she carefully picked out her words and slowly reported. Reporting to Your Highness, according to our investigation, there are 3 Beimang spy lairs in Huangnam County. 2 of them have been operating for more than 10 years. According to General Chu's arrangements, a group of Bailiang's peregrine falcons will enter Huangnam County at 5 o'clock. Another group of Bailiang's Eagle Guard, trained as crossbowmen, will arrive at 5 o'clock. Your Highness only needs to give the order and we can uproot these 3 malignant tumors. Chapter 901. There were all kinds of Bailiang spies, but the ones who were really responsible for cleaning up were all peregrine falcons. This peregrine falcon was responsible for patrolling Bailiang. Most of them were Jianghu masters raised by the Bailiang Palace. Lu Qiantang, Xu Xiu, and the group who later intercepted and killed Prince Zhao Kai were all men of sacrifice who killed people in exchange for secret martial arts manuals and wealth. There were also some desperados who had committed capital crimes in Liang and had no choice but to rely on Bailiang to seek a chance of survival. However, the current Bailiang spies were divided into 2. Half of the power was taken from Chu Lushan's hands and fell into the hands of Second Commandery Princess Su Weisheng. Su Weisheng was too lazy to waste time on the old personnel, so he directly transferred nearly 100 elite crossbowmen from the Bailiang army to become the Eagle Guard. They worked together with the Peregrine Falcon in name, but in reality they were restricting each other. Therefore the Eagle Guard swam together on the land of Bailiang, choosing people to devour. As for the affairs outside the Great Wall, the old spy leader Chu Lushan still controlled most of them. Su Weisheng seemed to have no intention of meddling with them for the time being. Su Fengnian had almost no involvement in these 2 most filthy organizations, but he had heard about the general structure. For example, the spies in the courtyard at this time were mostly turtle fish, who were dormant in one place all year round and were not allowed to move. There were also a few herring fish, who were more flexible. They regularly returned to Jianghu and were responsible for acting as the middleman to pass on military intelligence. Many turtles died of old age without knowing the identity of their companions. It was very unusual for them to gather together like this. When they were waiting, they were told by the female spy leader, Huang Nan, nicknamed Black Carp, that a big shot from the top was coming to Huangnam County to personally set up a trap. However, almost no one thought that it would be the Crown Prince of Bailiang who would come to my house, so they were a little scared for a moment. They were not commoners who only knew how to spread false information. Based on their experience and status, they had seen some secret records and heard some secrets with their own eyes. They had heard some secrets with their own ears. His Royal Highness's actions. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Haley, stand up and speak. Originally, it was agreed that your immediate superior, Wang Tongke, would come to Huangnam County. This crown prince came up with the idea on the spur of the moment and replaced Wang Tongchua's position. Don't mind a layman telling you what to do. For tonight's operation, this crown prince will only watch from the sidelines and will not participate." The woman who had been in charge of Huangnam County's espionage operations felt relieved. She stood up and was about to say a few polite words when His Royal Highness grabbed her neck and broke it with a crack. Then he threw her to the side with a smile on his face. Su Fengnian continued to smile and said, "I forgot to mention that Wang Tongke didn't come to Huangnam County not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. On the way here he was killed by Chu Lushan's men. This Haley has been flirting with a Beimang official for many years. Huangnam County has been rotten from the beginning to the end. This crown prince knows that other than her, there are actually a few people in the courtyard who have sided with Beimang's spider web. This time we have mobilized so many people. In the end, the ones who will die are just some insignificant minions. This won't do." The remaining people in the courtyard looked at each other in dismay. The Jade Turtle, who had already become a Bailiang official, took a step forward and gently looked at Haley's corpse. There was a desolate smile on his face as if he had accepted his fate. Su Fengnian ignored this spy who had exposed his identity and ignored him. He walked up the steps and put his hands in his sleeves, leaving only the jade pendant dangling from his sleeves. He smiled and asked, "Is there anyone else who wants to die a quick death?" If you are caught by this crown prince, you won't receive the same treatment as He Li. The courtyard was dead silent. It was obvious that no one responded to His Royal Highness' good intentions. Su Fengnian slowly said 3 names. The 3 of them were swiftly and violently cut in half by Hong Shuwen's saber. Su Fengnian said, according to a secret report, there is a Beimang loyalist in the courtyard. His identity is unknown, but it doesn't matter. Huangnam County Spy Agency was originally going to be overthrown. In order to save time and avoid future troubles, we can only kill them all. Huangnam County is a feng shui treasure land that Beimang's spider web has worked hard to develop. This crown prince believes in that big fish. His life is more valuable than all the Beiliang spies in the courtyard combined. Beiliang won't lose out on this deal. A fat rich merchant was surprisingly agile. He stepped lightly on his toes and was about to jump over the courtyard wall when Hong Shuwen stabbed him in the back with a halberd. His body hung heavily on the wall. Hong Shuwen walked over and grabbed his legs and pulled him back into the courtyard. With his death, the turtles and reeds who were still standing in the courtyard breathed a sigh of relief. If this guy had refused to give himself away and insisted on implicating the rest of the spies, they could only stretch their necks and wait to be slaughtered. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to go against the cold-blooded Beiliang crown prince. As turtles and reeds, most of them had families old and young. If they died here today, they would be sacrificing their lives for the Beiliang. If they wanted to hate someone, they could only hate those Beimang spies for being too cunning. However, after they died, their families old and young would still be able to live without worry. Just when everyone thought the dust had settled, Su Fengnian followed Su Yanbing's finger and stared at a middle-aged man with an old-fashioned face. This fatty is willing to die for you in order to protect you. It can be seen that your identity is not ordinary. Otherwise, if I were him, even if I were to die, I would drag the rest down with me. You're Han Shang, right? In the past, you've accomplished several great things at the border of Yuzhou. You can be considered to have made great contributions to the Beiliang. These years, you've been at odds with He Li and have been ostracized by him for many years. Originally, you were the most innocent spy in the courtyard. However, do you know when you gave yourself away? Han Shang smiled gloomily and looked at Su Yanbing. I've long heard that there are hidden talents in the king's mansion. However, the king of Beiliang's earthly branch men of sacrifice have all made a move. Only a guy called Su Yanbing has been doing nothing all this time. No one can figure out his depth. The Beimang side speculated that this person's realm was higher than Spear Immortal Wang Xiu's junior brother, Han Lao's Han. Now it seems that this is indeed the case. I've clearly suppressed my heartbeat and thought that there were no flaws. I didn't expect that I would still be seen through. Unfortunately, I can't spread this news. My mistake was that I didn't expect His Royal Highness to come in person and Su Yanbing to accompany him. It wasn't that Han Shang didn't want to put up a last-ditch struggle. However, he knew that his efforts were futile when he was targeted by Su Yanbing. Han Shang's vision went black. He didn't even see how Su Yanbing attacked before he fainted. Su Fengnian threw the jade pendant back to the official and smiled. Wang Tongke, Huangnam County has made up for your mistakes. Wang Tongke took the jade pendant and wore it on his waist. Only after he tore off his mask did the people in the courtyard realize that this person was Wang Tongke, the #1 spy in Huangnam County for more than 10 years. A man whose wife and children had never seen his true face for more than 10 years. He followed His Royal Highness into the room and asked softly, Your Highness, why don't you let me continue to hide in the dark? Although Huangnam County will be much cleaner after tonight, it's hard to guarantee that there won't be any accumulation of filth in the future. Su Fengnian said, You don't have to stay in Huangnam County anymore. Say goodbye to your wife and children and then go to Yuzhou. Wang Tongke nodded and didn't have any objections. Su Fengnian suddenly said, I know that you've nurtured a disciple with a very clean background. Chu Lushan thinks highly of him. Take him to Yuzhou and work hard for a few more years to train that young man. When he takes over your mantle, you can stop being a spy and reunite with your wife and children. In the future, you can change your appearance and live a stable life. Wang Tongke, who had been honed to the point that his appearance wouldn't change even when faced with blades and axes, was stunned. Su Fengnian smiled and said, Although most people would be even more worried if I said don't worry, I hope that you can rest assured. Beiliang hasn't mistreated its meritorious subjects in the past, and it won't do so in the future. The man suddenly laughed and said, I appreciate your highness's good intentions, but Wang Tongchua's life is cheap and he has long been used to scheming against others. If you suddenly ask this lowly one to plant flowers, this lowly one will feel even worse than killing this lowly one. Besides, our line of work isn't like mounting a horse to fight and killing enemies. It's useless once you're old. The older you get, the more proficient you'll be. Su Fengnian was speechless. Wang Tongke blushed for the first time and said, Your Highness, my 10-year-old son is full of admiration for Your Highness after listening to the storyteller's story. This kid has been very strong since he was young and wants to go to the Phoenix Battalion to be a White Horse loyal follower. Su Fengnian nodded and smiled. Good, I'll allow him to go to the Phoenix Battalion when he's of age. Wang Tongke suppressed his excitement and said in a low voice, Your Highness, shall we plan tonight's extermination? Su Fengnian waved his hand and said, Leave Han Shang to me. As for the rest, Chu Lushan's arrangements will remain unchanged. Hong Shuwen will move with you tonight. You can go about your business. The remaining people in the courtyard still need you to pacify. Wang Tongke made a sound of acknowledgement and quietly left the room. Chapter 902. In the Song Manor, Song Yin took the initiative to find Li Fuzhen and went for a walk in the manor. Song Huangmei, who had a lively personality, had experienced many twists and turns and dared to touch this bad luck. She obediently took off her sword and went to learn embroidery. Song Yin thought about it and slowly said, Niece, let's talk about something that might be a little boring. After Uncle is done, you can go back and tell the administrator why Huangnam County has changed. Now that Lingzhou's officialdom is undergoing a drastic change, if I, Song Yin, were not the administrator's disciple, but the Lingzhou general's advisor, I would put myself in his shoes, standing in His Highness the Heir Apparent's point of view to look at the problem. There are 3 ways to deal with it. The worst way is to try to use killing people to convince the masses. There are also 3 levels of high, middle, and low. Killing a large number of officials was a bad idea, so it could only cause the people in Lingzhou to lose their confidence. Not only did the local officials in Lingzhou feel that this Lingzhou general was useless, even the scholars from other places who were watching the show thought that they had married the wrong man and had met the wrong person. If they could kill the officials that caused trouble today, they could kill them tomorrow. The situation was precarious, so what if they got an official position in a short period of time? The best plan was to kill a few officials like Song Yin, which was relatively better because Suli was not the main instigator of the chaos in Lingzhou. He was ordered by officials around the same level as Song Yin. There were civil officials and generals, and they were all deep-rooted local snakes. With this group of people secretly instructing them, Lingzhou was able to work together. As for whether to kill Song Yin, kill the governor, or take the chance to cut off the limbs of the Huaihua general of Longqing Prefecture, there was not much of a difference. The officials that caused trouble were timid and kept quiet out of fear. The Lingzhou officialdom would have a moment of peace, but this plan was not a long-term plan. Once the Lingzhou general left, Lingzhou would still be Lingzhou. This was the same logic as the dynasty ruling over corrupt officials. Treating the symptoms but not the root cause. When the spring breeze blows, the weeds grow. The best way is very simple. You just need to kill one person. Li Fuzhen had never been interested in the officialdom, but when the governor talked about it, she did not find it boring. However, Song Yan's following words caused her to lose all color in her face, that is to kill Administrator Darren. Killing anyone would be better than killing your father to intimidate Lingzhou. Even the administrator of Bailiang, whose official rank was the same as that of Bailiang's protector general, could be killed. If one angered His Royal Highness, who could escape the calamity? Moreover, niece, you certainly know what kind of official Administrator Darren is. In the officialdom, people would burn the bridge after crossing the river. There was no end to it. In the Liangwen there was the Song family which had 3 heroes and 2 teachers. In the military there was the Han family which had been guarding the border of Jizhou for generations. Compared to official Li, they were all genuine pillars of the imperial court. In this sense, if they could die, official Li could die many times over. To put it bluntly, the Li family had plundered so much gold and silver. After the confiscation, the soldiers at the border would be able to enjoy a lavish new year. There were 20 to 30 pawnshops under the Li family's name. There were countless bribes from the subordinates. Rare toys, antiques, calligraphy, and paintings were bought by the Li family with their left hand and sold at a high price from the pawnshops with their right hand. Not to mention, there were also 2 horse caravans with more than 100 people that specialized in salt and iron trade and tea horse trade. Thus, when I, Song Yin, heard that His Royal Highness was the general of Lingzhou, my first thought was that the Su family wanted to deal with your Li family. I even sent someone to send a secret letter to the border asking if your brother Li Hanlin was under house arrest. I don't know if it was because teacher was under the light or because he trusted the old relationship between the Su and Li families too much. Li Fuzhen finally spoke. Our family would not have fallen to such a state. Song Yin smiled and said something strange. If these words came from teacher's mouth, uncle might not believe it. Li Fuzhen had a blank expression. Song Yin continued, His Highness did not use these 3 plans to resolve Lingzhou's predicament, which was unexpected. This was because the 2 best plans above the worst plan all tested one's maturity. If one was not careful, it would be a thankless end. The middle plan was to use people to kill people and build momentum. None of these could be lacking. The best plan was for him to not be the general of Lingzhou who was personally involved in the situation. He used the power of the king of Beiliang to put pressure on the administrator and Zhong Hongwu. Then, with Huang Chang and the others who had just entered Beiliang, he worked from the bottom up step by step. One on top, one on the bottom, one on the inside, one on the outside. In the end, he had Su official who was caught between the 2 sides, go with the flow and follow the trend. However, while such a method was meticulous, it could only be done gradually. At the very least, it would take a year or 2. Since His Highness for some reason chose the middle plan, which was more radical than the worst plan, then Uncle, who did not want to be the governor of a prefecture, had a chance. Other than Uncle's own ambition, there is actually one thing that I need to tell Sir Li. The one who needs to defile himself is not Song Yan, but teacher himself. Song Yan is not so important as to defile his own reputation. On the other hand, it is time for teacher to reduce his own power. Song Yan leaving the Li family is the right time. Li Fuzhen said softly, I don't know how much of Uncle's words are true or false. I also don't know if these plans are good or bad. I only remember that Father once said in private that Uncle Song was not as good as him as an official, but he saw the situation better than him. It was just that Beiliang is small, so Uncle Song could only use 2 of his power. Song Yan was stunned. After a long time he sighed heavily, Teacher knows me. Li Fuzhen raised her head and looked into the distance. She asked, Sir Song, is His Royal Highness a smart person like you? Song Yan had probably just joined the Lingzhou general, so it was hard for him not to be a bit worried. He did not directly give an answer. He only said, in the past it was not good to make wild guesses. Now that we have met, it is clear. In Beiliang there is no one more self-deprecating than him. Since Li Fuzhen called him Sir Song and not Uncle Song, Song Yan knew that his relationship with his teacher's family had pretty much stopped there. He said calmly, Song Yan will say one last thing from the bottom of my heart. That Guo Fufeng is a person who can only share riches and honor. As for whether or not he can share hardships, I'm thinking too much. The Li family will probably not collapse one day. There was no anger on Li Fuzhen's face. She gently bowed and left slowly. In the secret room of the private residence in Huangnam County, Han Shang had already been skinned alive and had his tendons pulled out, but he still stubbornly refused to say a word. Su Fengyin stretched his hand into the basin to wash his hands. Looking at the slightly rippling, thick blood, he sighed, not everyone can be a great spy. Hong Shuwen's hair stood on end as he stood to the side. Su Yambing, on the other hand, had a calm expression. Hong Shuwen looked at His Royal Highness's hands that were still slightly red. Should I go change the basin of water? Su Fengyin nodded. Su Yambing waited for Hong Shuwen to change the basin of water before quietly saying, Your Highness, if I am not wrong, is this Han Diaoxi's unique silk drawing technique? Chapter 903. Su Fengyin didn't hide anything from this loyal and devoted senior. He pointed at his own head and said with a smile, After Han Xingxian was killed in Divine Martial City, I had an unorthodox method to use his head to learn some things. Back then, when I killed Raccoon Diwu in northern Mang, I also benefited greatly from it. However, my foundation in the Yellow Court was stripped away by Lu Hao's astronomical technique. My cultivation is not good enough. Even if I know how to use many techniques, I can't use them. It's like a low-level swordsman who has memorized all the moves of the 2-sleeved green snake, but his strength is not enough. 4-realm first level. I have already entered the false realm 3 times, maybe 4 times. No one has ever done it before. I don't have any regrets. Su Yambing did not say anything else. Hong Shuwen brought in a basin of clean water. Su Fengyin washed his hands thoroughly and shook off the water. With a thought, 7 or 8 flying swords flew out of Han Shang's body one by one. They spun around in the basin of water and then disappeared into his sleeves. As long as the sword embryo was complete, these little things did not need to be supported by internal energy. Thus, Su Fengyin could use them with ease. Su Fengyin left the secret room and returned to the house. In the courtyard, the turtles and reeds from Huangnam County, who had been cleared of suspicion, began to move stealthily in an orderly manner. Some acted as bait, while others acted as camouflage. Wang Tongke also disappeared without a trace. Although everyone in the courtyard was on the brink of death, it was actually very common for some mobile spies other than the turtles, especially spies near the border. In the past, There was a county in Yuzhou where spies were so exaggerated that Chu Lushan had to personally lead 600 cavalry to encircle them. Only one of the 17 spies did not stand in Beimang's camp. The rest were infiltrated by Beimang, while the rest were lured or forced to side with Beimang. Chu Lushan walked in alone and faced the 17 spies. He said self-deprecatingly, "I am honored to tell you that after I joined, you only have 2 enemies." Of course, Beimang's southern dynasty was not much better than Beiliang's. Su Fengnian moved a chair and sat under the eaves, quietly waiting for the peregrine falcon and eagle guard to arrive. According to the secret report, the 3 lairs of the 2 old and 1 new in Huangnam County were located in a Taoist temple, a gang and a brothel. During the Spring and Autumn War, the brothels of various countries were no doubt the spies. So when Chu was in charge of the spies, he was disdainful. When he took charge of the report, he said he captured a popular courtesan from each of the 10 brothels. 3 or 3. At the end of the Spring and Autumn War, there were very few idiots who would do such a thing. Firstly, it was very difficult to train an elite spy who was a woman. Secondly, everyone already knew that it was easy to gather information in brothels. The local spies kept a close eye on the prostitutes in brothels. If there was even the slightest bit of suspicion, they would rather kill the wrong person than let the wrong person go. Now that the smoke had dispersed, female spies began to hide in the brothels again. It was just that there were not many of them. Su Fengnian leaned against the back of the chair under the eaves. He slowly thought of Dunhuang and Wu Meinyang. Compared to Jiangnan, Beiliang was late at night. Su Fengnian looked up at the quiet and peaceful twilight. The Beimang spies, who did not know they were in danger because of the Korean merchants and the black carp shelter, could still live for a few more hours. There was a series of subtle knocks on the door. Hong Shuwen, who was in charge of odd jobs, went to open the door. Su Fengnian looked over and smiled. He saw a familiar face. When the person saw His Royal Highness, she was also pleasantly surprised. Su Fengnian knew her name was Ren Shanyu. She was a woman in her 30s. She used to use a pair of Xianxia axes. She still had the face of a young girl. What was especially rare was her chest. In Jianghu City, she had almost died at the hands of a cat man. In front of the cat man, who was known as Invincible Han, anyone could die at a moment's notice. Su Fengnian smiled and asked the woman, who was kneeling on the ground, to stand up. He said softly, "Ren Shanyu, this time you are leading 40 Eagle Guard into Huangnam County? That's a promotion. Congratulations." Ren Shanyu, whose name was called out by His Highness, smiled brightly, revealing a pair of cute little canine teeth that did not match her age. It was hard to imagine that such a little girl, who caused people's imagination to run wild, would wipe the blood on her chest with the axe after chopping people like cutting vegetables. She said shyly, "Your Highness, it is Wang Lin, who appeared in Jianghu City with me, who is leading the team. I am just a pawn who is scouting ahead, similar to a scout in the army. The peregrine falcon has already met with Wang Tongke." Wang Lin and the others entered the city at 5:15. Su Fengnian nodded and asked Hong Shuwen to bring a chair for the woman. She seemed to have received a great reward that she did not dare to hope for. Her face was filled with surprise and anxiety. She sat down gently, but only dared to put half of her butt on the chair. Su Fengnian smiled and asked, "You just became a small official? It doesn't match your achievements. Do you want me to help you say something?" The woman, who had once become a bandit in Jianghu Mountain and killed countless people, was fidgeting uneasily. Her earlobes were already red. She tried her best to calm herself down and not let her chest tremble too much. She said solemnly, "This servant was born in a lowly family in Dongyue. If it wasn't for the fact that Northern Liang took me in when I was 9 years old and became a spy, I would have died long ago. I'm also stupid. I've delayed military plans twice. If I were anywhere else, I would have slit my throat and committed suicide to atone for my sins. I'm already satisfied to be alive." Su Fengnian put his elbow on the armrest of the chair and rested his chin on his hand. He smiled and said, "I didn't expect Lu Qiuer to still have some humanity left." Hearing His Royal Highness's frank comments about General Chu, whom all Beiliang spies respected like a god, Ren Shanyu thought she had made a big mistake. She was so scared that she wanted to stand up and kneel down again. Su Fengnian pressed down with his other hand. "I'm just saying. Don't be nervous." Ren Shanyu's butt fell back on the chair. She was even more afraid to speak. Ren Shanyu gathered her courage and sneaked a glance at Su Fengnian. She saw His Royal Highness squinting his eyes and smiling enchantingly. She clenched the corners of her clothes tightly. Her face was covered in sweat. She wanted to say something. Su Fengnian said helplessly, "If you have something to say, say it." Ren Shanyu gritted her teeth. She lowered her head and murmured, "Your Highness, I only have one wish in my life." Su Fengyin turned to look at the woman. He asked curiously, "Tell me." She raised her head. After saying this, she fell limp on the chair. This time, her butt was finally able to sit firmly on the chair. Hong Shuwen wanted to laugh but didn't dare. He felt uncomfortable holding it in. He admired this woman from the bottom of his heart. She actually dared to take liberties with His Royal Highness. Her wish was to have His Royal Highness personally touch her chest before she died. She even said that this was the only thing she could give him. Hong Shuwen didn't know why, but when he saw the woman's resolute and clear eyes, he felt an indescribable sadness. Su Fengyin stretched out his hand and helped her tidy up her hair. Then Su Fengyin retracted his hand and looked forward. He muttered to himself, "This time on the way to Huangnam County, I kept thinking about how to do things in Lingzhou. With those people who only talk about rules and not reason, is it worth it for me to talk about rules, reason, and affection? But now I understand." The woman who forgot to be shy clearly didn't understand what His Royal Highness was saying. Su Fengyin's lips curled up. "I don't need to touch it. I know that place is very..." After pausing for a long time, His Royal Highness finally spat out 2 words. "Spectacular." Chapter 904. 9,000-word chapters. In the 17th day of this month, I have only updated 18 chapters, only making up for the 5 chapters one owed last month. However, the 18 chapters already have a total of 90,000 words. The average word count of each chapter is close to 5,000 words. I think that the lack of updates is still a necessary effort. Moreover, this kind of updating without deliberately splitting the chapters to make up for the lack of updates is also an effort. In the future, I won't talk about updating in the chapters. In any case, I will remember it in my heart. When night fell, Hong Shuwen excitedly followed Wang Tongke to fish with the net. The other 2 members of the Phoenix Battalion stayed in the courtyard. Su Fengyin left the courtyard and only brought Su Yanbing and Huyen Guanin, who had disguised herself as a page boy. They came to a place that would make a virtuous gentleman both spit and swallow his saliva. The brothel was coincidentally adjacent to the brothel alley in Huangnam County where the net was being collected. Lingzhou was rich and populous. Visiting prostitutes was a common practice. Many of the bodhisattvas and heavenly maidens that merchants spent a lot of money to provide for also had plump bodies. Many monks who saw the sculptures and murals all lamented that the human heart was not what it used to be. Walking in the brightly lit and powdered fireworks alley, there were many ambitious and arrogant guests wearing mink coats. Huyen Guanin followed behind Su Fengyin, afraid that she would lose him. No matter what situation Su Yanbing was in, his state of mind was like an ancient well without ripples. Perhaps he was also like this when he attained Heaven's Gate. As the former hedonistic leader of Bailiang, Su Fengyin was familiar with this kind of work. He chose the most brightly lit Peach Cheeks brothel. The brothel was 3 stories high and the lanterns hung high. It was not like the neighboring brothels where a few women with heavy makeup were sent out to solicit business. Su Fengyin waved his hand and threw a piece of silver to the brothel's turtle leg. The silver did not even need to be weighed and instantly slid into his sleeve. The young man's smiling face immediately became attentive. This kind of person was not simple. He had good eyesight, a good tongue, and a strong body. He sized them up from head to toe and decided that there were a few distinguished guests who could spend a lot of money. He immediately shouted, but in reality he was sending a secret message to the brothel keeper. As expected, a woman walked out slowly from the brothel. However, compared to most brothel keepers who were middle-aged women, this woman was very young. Su Fengyin's discerning eyes saw that she was the brothel keeper's daughter, commonly known as the little boss. When she saw Su Fengyin, she was in high spirits and obediently snuggled up to him. Su Fengyin did not take advantage of the situation to take advantage of her. He pinched a piece of silver with 2 fingers and threw it into the white and tender cleavage between the woman's bright red silk tube top. He smiled and said that he wanted 2 musicians who could play music and not some courtesan. The little boss was very happy. In her line of work, there were 2 kinds of bastards that she was most afraid of. The first kind was those whose family background was neither high nor low. They were not rich, but they could still afford to enjoy themselves for 10 to 15 months. They were half a bucket of water, and as soon as they arrived at the brothel, they would start to show off, wishing that they could buy all the girls in the brothel. The second kind was those who did not have much money, but could not be considered the son of an official. Not only did they rely on their family background to eat and drink for free, they also liked to cause trouble. In the end, if they could not solve the trouble, they would only give the brothel a hard time. The gray-haired young master in front of her was very heartwarming. He was generous and tactful. Because he spent money on the courtesans, the amount of money he spent was not much less than those popular courtesans. Moreover, he could also increase the popularity of the courtesans. If he was a poet or scholar with a small reputation, he could sing a few poems with the girls, and these courtesans would really become outstanding. Without needing Su Fengnian to say anything, he was invited to an elegant room on the 3rd floor. When they were going up the stairs, the graceful little head's slender waist swayed more vigorously than usual. In her mind, if this elegant young master wanted her to accompany him, even if she offered a lower price, it would not be a big deal. Most of the men in Bailiang were strong and rough. With his appearance and temperament, which was similar to that of a scholar from a Jiangnan aristocratic family, in the end she should be the one to take advantage of the job. When the young master reached the 3rd floor, he asked for a room facing the street. She kindly reminded him that it would be a little noisy here, but he dismissed it with a laugh. The little head was also happy to go with the flow. If the guest was willing to spend money in vain, she could not cry and shout to stop him. She pushed open the door and entered. In the room, there was already a young courtesan waiting for business. Before she went out to call for another guest, a young master with a pair of red phoenix eyes tugged on her sleeve. Without batting an eyelid, he asked her to hold a banknote. He smiled and said, "What's with riding a donkey looking for a donkey looking for a donkey looking for a donkey?" The little head's eyes jumped with joy. She knew the answer, so she teased the young master and asked him what he meant by riding a donkey looking for a donkey looking for a donkey. But that young master did not overdo it. He did not say the word ride, which slightly tickled her heart. However, this kind of small ripple came and went in a hurry. It was much faster than many people with silver spears and wax heads taking off their pants and putting on their pants. Su Fengnian did not sit down. Su Yanbing went out of the room and closed the door. He stood at the door with his eyes closed and focused. Huyan Guanin's back was almost leaning against the wall. She was wearing a large mink hat as she stared fixedly at her own boots. The young manager's eyes were sharp. How could he not recognize that this was a woman? Bailiang had always had an open culture. Women were not only experts in riding horses, drawing bows and hunting. Some bold and unrestrained women would not only pay to invite the courtesans into their manors to sing, they also dared to personally come to the brothel for a stroll. Some of the more bold and unrestrained women would not only pay to invite the courtesans into their manors to sing, they would also dare to personally come to the brothel for a stroll. Some of the more unique and gluttonous women had long been accustomed to this sight in larger brothels. There was a slightly aged courtesan in the Peach Cheeks brothel who would be invited by a widow in Lingzhou to grind a mirror every few days. Every time she returned, she would still be radiant and radiant. The young manager privately asked her how she felt, and the courtesan would reply with the word, "Excellent." Then everything would be revealed without a word. This almost caused the young manager's heart to be moved and he wanted to give it a try. Unfortunately, the courtesan said that the unattainable widow liked women of the same age as her. Only then did the young manager resentfully give up. Taking advantage of the slender and handsome young master admiring a clear bottle with a few wintersweet flowers, the young leader introduced herself as Chao Juan. Not to mention in a brothel, this was a vulgar name that was considered rare anywhere. She also introduced the girl who had a good relationship with her as Snowsuit. There was a bamboo cage in the room with a parrot whose feathers were as white as snow. While Chao Juan was talking, Su Fengnian touched the opening of the bottle. Then he tilted his head and tapped the mysterious cyan bottle with his finger. Not only did Chao Juan find it interesting, but even Snowsuit, who was obviously not familiar with serving customers, also had a look of surprise in her eyes. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Living in a brothel, they had seen many rough men who reeked of alcohol. They had seen many old men whose bodies were soft and fleshy but had lecherous looks. They had even seen many scholars who were gentle and refined when opening the door and closing the door impatiently. This young master who had the patience to make things difficult for a cheap bottle behind closed doors was very amusing to them. Huyan Guanin extended a finger and gently lifted her mink hat. Seeing that he did not do anything that she did not know whether to say was dissolute or vulgar, she, who was sullen, snorted softly, but her mood was slightly better. Su Fengnian, who had his eyes fixed on the bottle as soon as he entered, exhaled and winked at the three women in the room. Then he tapped the slender neck and the round body of the bottle. He smiled at Chao Juan and said, "Listen, one bell and one chime. If you carefully distinguish them, you can tell that the sounds are very distinct. This is a bottle produced by the Dongyue Imperial Kiln. Not to mention the whole bottle, even a fingernail-sized fragment is more expensive than gold or jade. The reason why it is so priceless, other than the scarcity of porcelain produced by this kiln, is because of the sound of the bell. In the Book of Music, Sage Zhang wrote a very famous sentence. When a gentleman hears the sound of the bell, he thinks of the military officials in danger. When he hears the sound of the bell, he thinks of the officials in charge of the border. How could Chao Juan believe in the Dongyue Imperial Kiln's gallbladder bottle? She also did not know what a scholarly gentleman's bell was. She only thought that he was a man who flaunted his knowledge. She threw a coquettish glance at him and smiled tenderly. "Young master, did you come to visit a brothel or to knock on a bottle? If you want it, go ahead and take it." If Chao Juan frowns in the slightest, Chao Juan and Snowsuit will recommend themselves to you when you come to Peach Cheek's house. They will even give you money every time. Su Fengyan smiled and shook his head. He took out all the banknotes, rolled them into a ball, and gently threw them into another flower vase. "It's up to you to believe it or not. In any case, I only have this much money on me. If I take the bottle, I can live with my conscience." Chao Juan suddenly widened her eyes and said, "Young master, you're not joking?" Su Fengyan sat down and asked with a smile, "Are you regretting it?" Chao Juan hesitated for a moment, then laughed heartily and said, "What's there to regret? If young master didn't say it, sooner or later, it would have been broken by that clumsy girl. I would just take a dustpan and dump it on the street. Maybe someone would even think it was a hindrance. However, since young master is penniless, Chao Juan won't ask for an extra copper coin tonight. But young master must promise to come to Peach Cheek's house often to visit my little sister Snowsuit. Is that all right?" By the time she finished speaking, Chao Juan was already glued to Su Fengyan's body. The two of them sat on the same chair. He sat on the chair and she sat on his lap. They didn't delay each other. Chao Juan had a graceful figure. Her full breasts were cleverly rubbed together. Her charming face was full of charm. Su Fengyan patted her leg and motioned for her to get up without hurting her feelings. He squinted his eyes and said with a smile, "I'm not from Lingzhou, so it will be difficult for me to come to Peach Cheek's house in the future. However, I have a few friends who are doing well in Lingzhou. If Peach Cheek's house wants to move to the county capital or meets with some trouble in Huangnam County, I can ask them to help say a few words. Of course, you didn't believe me when I said that the porcelain bottle was worth 1,000 taels of gold. You can choose not to believe me this time." After Chao Juan got up, she didn't care about pretending to be reserved anymore. She was afraid that there wouldn't be another opportunity like this. She hurriedly and carefully asked, "Young master made friends in Lingzhou's county capital. Chao Juan doesn't dare to have extravagant hopes to associate with them and doesn't dare to disturb them. However, may I ask who is the son of an aristocratic family in Huangnam County? Our Peach Cheek's house is willing to worship him like a bodhisattva." Chapter 905. Su Fengyan glanced at the window from the corner of his eyes. The Peach Cheeks building was only slightly shorter than the largest brothel in Lingzhou. Looking from here, it was clear at a glance. If the porcelain bottle fell into the hands of someone who knew its value, it would be impossible to get it without 2,000 to 3,000 taels of silver. Su Fengyan was always in a good mood when doing business. No matter if it was a big business that made him a lot of money or a small business that made him a pitiful few copper coins. It had been a few years since he went to a brothel. Furthermore, after being in love for so many years, he only had the part of being absurd and prodigal. It was the first time that he had made money, so it was a good sign. This made Su Fengyan not have any ill feelings towards Chao Juan's scheming. After sifting through the names in his mind, he knew that with the Peach Cheeks building's little boss's vision, she was coincidentally from Lingzhou in Huangnam County. Not to mention that Su Fengyan did not know any of them. Even if he knew a few of them, they would only be laughed at by her. However, Li Hanlin, who grew up in Huangnam County, did not dare to bring a few of them to embarrass himself in front of him. The few that he brought to Jianghu were more beautiful and enchanting than women. They were all young Master Li's old sweethearts. This made Su Fengyan feel a little troubled. Could it be that he could only bring up Song Yan official song? However, if this was the case, it would be quite interesting if it spread out. He believed that even if it reached Governor Song's ears, the newly promoted governor of Lingzhou could only pinch his nose and accept it. Su Fengyan resisted the urge to throw a bucket of dirty water at Song Yan with great difficulty because he inadvertently remembered one of Li Hanlin's enemies. Back then, that guy had been dealt with miserably by Li Hanlin, the #1 young ruffian in Feng Province. After Liang was established, Feng Province merged with Lingzhou, and the Li family moved to Lingzhou's capital. That foppish playboy finally had a chance to live. Although his father's official rank had always been suppressed by the administrator, at least he didn't have to live in fear all day long. Especially after Li Hanlin joined the army, he was completely reborn. He didn't care about these old grudges at all. That guy didn't feel ashamed of the miserable situation he had encountered back then and instead felt proud. Whenever he met someone, he would say that he had fought with Li Hanlin and Li Biaozhang from the Purple Diao Street in the north all the way to the Straw Coat Street in the south. Did anyone dare? Perhaps when the Li family moved to Lingzhou, there were still people who dared to say a few words. However, when Li Hanlin chopped off a bunch of barbarians' heads at the border, no one dared to have such courage. Su Fengyan had gone to Huangnam County to walk in the spring with Li Hanlin and his brothers. He had barely seen that poor guy once, but he didn't even greet him. He didn't know if that guy still had a memory of him. Therefore, Su Fengyan smiled and said, "Huangnam County's meritorious governor Wang's son, Wang Yunshu. He has some friendship with me." When he said this name, not only did Chao Zhuan's eyes change, even the artist, Snowsuit, who was far less experienced than the little leader, was somewhat afraid. There was no other reason. This Grand Master Wang was too domineering in Huangnam County. It could be said that he had a well-known reputation. As soon as the administrator's son, Na Shan, left, Wang Yunshu called himself the king. His father, as the meritorious officer of the county, assisted the governor Song Yen and was in charge of the selection of the Department of Administration. That meant that he grasped the lifeline of the promotion of officials. Could be said that he held the power of life and death in his hands. Moreover, Wang Gongchao had an adopted son who was about the same age as him. It was not known whether the Wang family had arranged things well or that the adopted son was really lucky at the border. When he returned to Huangnam County, he became the commandant of 400 soldiers. As a result, some of the gang leaders with many martial arts schools had to call him brother in front of others and beg for mercy behind others. The reason why Chao Zhuan of Peach Cheek's brothel was so attentive was mainly because young Master Wang was a big benefactor of their brothel. The Shiitake Inn on the street in Huangnam County had once annoyed young Master Wang. If it were not for the relatives of the Shiitake Inn and the administrator who sent women and money, young Master Wang would have brought people to demolish the brothel long ago. Since then, young Master Wang often came to Peach Cheek's brothel to throw money and money. Coincidentally, Wang Yunshu monopolized 2 courtesans in Peach Cheek's brothel tonight. They were having fun on the same floor, but there was some distance between them. After all, the little leader was Snowsuit, a courtesan who was close to Chao Zhuan. Her status in Peach Cheek's brothel was not high. Chao Zhuan was kind and only led some pleasing guests into this room, afraid that Snowsuit would be wronged. This was a rare tenderness in a brothel that did not know what the word friendship meant. More of them were poor young prostitutes who were forced to break their buds because they did not want to be eliminated. More of them were women who were bruised but still forced to smile. Chao Zhuan was also cruel and merciless to the women in Peach Cheek's brothel except for Snowsuit. If she did not do this, even if she was the little leader, she would not be able to stand firm. Chao Zhuan took a step forward and then stepped back. She threw a glance at Snowsuit, and the courtesan began to play the zither. Chao Zhuan then smiled and said, "What a coincidence, Master Wang is on the first floor. Is he with you?" Chao Zhuan had already regarded the child in front of her as talking nonsense. As long as he said no and casually found an excuse, Chao Zhuan would not ask the root of the matter. He came to Peach Cheek's brothel in the winter to seek pleasure, so there was no need to make a scene. Otherwise, Chao Zhuan initially had the mischievous idea of going out to invite Wang Yunshu to verify his identity. However, if she did that, it would not benefit her. After Wang Yunshu came over, he would beat the child in front of her out of the brothel. As the main culprit, Chao Zhuan would not gain any benefits, so why bother? They saw the child walk to the window and lean against the window frame. Out of Chao Zhuan and Snowsuit's expectations, his voice was warm as he said, "Just in time. I'll have to trouble Miss Chao Zhuan to go and tell him that an old friend of his has come to Peach Cheek's brothel in Lingzhou's capital." Chao Zhuan smiled and asked, "Child, then I'll really go?" Su Fengyan smiled and said, "If you don't go, then you're a puppy." Chao Zhuan's charming eyes were like silk. To think that child is a scholar and likes such indecent positions. Huyan Guanyin, who had been quietly listening, felt that it was strange at first. After she came to her senses, she fiercely glared at that fellow. Su Fengyan, who had suffered an unexpected calamity, simply turned his head and looked at Shiitake Inn, which was still singing and dancing peacefully. Chao Zhuan saw that he did not seem to be joking. After quickly weighing the pros and cons, she still gathered her courage and went out to trouble the surly child Wang. Su Fengyan was quietly waiting for the turmoil in Shiitake Inn. This was because he was not very certain that the Bailiang spy would be able to achieve great success and then easily retreat unscathed. Han Shang's unexpected surprise to the Peregrine Falcon and Eagle Guard, who were currently rushing to Huangnam County to encircle and suppress him, it was very likely that it would be a bad thing that would require many lives to make up for. Bailiang was Bailiang. Men of sacrifice were men of sacrifice. They might not always be connected to everything. This was because Han Shang's identity being exposed was not within expectations. With such an important person like him participating, there would most likely be 1 or 2 Bailiang men of sacrifice with outstanding strength to hold the fort in Huangnam County. There were not many bloody battles between spies. The side that had the initiative would win because they had a target to aim at. Everything had its vanquisher. The more accurate the plan, the better. If you had a 3rd-grade martial artist present, then I would send a 2nd-grade master to fight with you. If you had a master, then I would send 2. If you had 3, then I would not hesitate to use a 1st-grade Vajra realm martial artist to play with you. It was difficult to survive in the Jianghu. Those who were at the peak of the Jianghu were not necessarily free and unfettered. This was especially so for those who had become lackeys. They had no choice but to cherish their reputation. This was because they would never know if their next life and death battle would be a mortal enemy of the same realm or even an expert of a higher realm. These experts who stood on the opposing side, even if they were known as rare and transcendent figures, once you encountered them, once was enough. Decades of hard work, decades of martial arts training, even if you were in the Jianghu when you were alive, you would still end up with nothing. Of course, the battle between spies was more like Wang Tongkai and Han Shang's climbing. It relied on acting skills, adaptability, and luck. Su Fengyin listened to the melodious sound of the zither and turned to look at Huyen Guanyin, who was finally willing to approach him. She looked up and asked softly, "That Sister Ren in the courtyard, she likes you?" Su Fengyin laughed involuntarily and said softly, "She likes someone who is not the next king of Bailiang. Otherwise she would have worked for Bailiang since she was 9 years old and would feel that she was not worth it. However, to be honest, if she found out that I was an ugly pighead after meeting me in Xinwu City, then she would definitely not have told me her wish when we met in the courtyard today." Huyen Guanyin raised her chin and looked away. "Then why didn't you fulfill that sister's wish? Isn't it as easy as lifting a finger?" On the way to Huangnam County, Su Fengyin, who had been separated by a thin layer of silk, had a smile on his face. She did not get an answer, but her mood was lighter than if she had gotten one. She turned around with a straight face and secretly smiled. Su Fengyin turned to look at the brothel and said in his heart, "Death warriors don't even have any thoughts. They will only die faster." The reason why he did not participate was not only because he did not want to get too involved in the spy system, but more importantly, he and Su Yambing had acted too early, making the extermination go too smoothly. Some old bastards hiding at the bottom of the quagmire would rather watch their disciples and grand-disciples die one after the other than stay in the quagmire and not be willing to rashly come ashore. Many things that could have been handled simply would often become very complicated because he was Su Fengyin. He had no choice but to consolidate at every step. Chapter 906. Su Fengyin listened to the gradually mixed sound of the zither. One of the reasons was that her fingering technique was not skillful enough. Another reason was that although this new zither was forced to use a trick, it was not possible to go to the peak of a mountain to obtain good materials, so it used an old cedar beam as the body of the zither. This was the helplessness of many poor zither masters, but this was not the problem. Many novices and even veterans who had been immersed in the zither all their lives did not realize that the body of the zither was not necessarily neat and smooth. Those who could play the zither might not be able to hack the zither, but those who could hack the zither must be good at playing the zither. When Su Fengyin was young, he did not know how many famous zither he had dissected. He found that these grooves were not as smooth as a mirror as described in the zither score. With Su Yambing outside the room, he did not have to worry about Shitakian not knowing what was going on. Since Chao Zhuan had not invited Master Wang, Su Fengyin had nothing to do, so he walked over to Snowsuit and asked her to get up. Under the incredulous gaze of this woman, he cut the zither open. He quietly took out a flying sword from his sleeve and helped her hack the zither a little. He smiled and said, "If you break the zither, I will buy you a new one later. I still have the money. In fact, a good zither lies in the sound that wants to come out but cannot. To put it in a more vulgar way, it is like a woman taking off her clothes seductively. When she is about to take off her clothes but not completely, it always makes a man daydream. When there is nothing left. Let's not use this analogy, it will spoil the mood. What I can do now is very limited. However, when you find someone to hack the zither for you in the future, you can tell them." Snowsuit listened to this elegant young master's seemingly endless warm and mellow talk. At first, she was able to remember every word, but later she could not help but ask with a smile, "Young master, did you really come to the Peach Cheek's house to get drunk?" Su Fengyin did not raise his head. He teased, "From beginning to end, you did not give me any wine. There was tea, but even if I drank the whole teapot, I would not get drunk." Huyan Guanyin came to the front of the bamboo bird cage and made a face at the parrot. Snowsuit was about to get the wine when Su Fengyin shook his head and said, "No need." Then Snowsuit saw the young master carefully playing the zither. She was in a daze. Su Fengyin abruptly stood up and then sat down again. He stared blankly at the broken zither that he had personally chopped. He withdrew his gaze and closed his eyes. He tapped his forehead with a finger and murmured softly. In fact, he was constantly repeating a sentence. When things are unfair, they cry out. Snowsuit only thought that this young master had gone mad from playing the zither. That young master was still talking to himself, but his words were fragmentary. In addition, she was also frightened, so she couldn't hear him clearly. Uncle Sun Ping once said that there is a vast expanse between heaven and earth. I too once wandered the world in a trance. Su Fengyin reached out and tried to grab something. Then, his fingers began to draw in the air in a disorderly manner. Snowsuit moved even further away from him. Outside the room, Su Yambing suddenly opened his eyes, as if he was facing a great enemy. As for further away, Chao Juan felt as if she was risking her life by knocking on Wang Yunshu's door. Inside there was laughter and laughter. Outside the room there was a large group of retainers. There were the armed soldiers of young Master Wang's sworn brother, as well as the direct disciples of the masters of the major gangs in Huangnam County. The way they looked at her, the little leader, was not serious. As expected, the door did not open. Only Wang Yunshu's scolding could be heard. He threatened that if anyone dared to spoil his mood, he would break the legs of the men and feed them to the dogs. As for the women, he would reward more than 10 of his subordinates. Chao Juan was so frightened that her voice trembled. She did not dare to push the door open. She said in a trembling voice, "Young Master Wang, I am Chao Juan. I have something to report. A young man from Lingzhou City just came to our Peach Cheek's house. After drinking some wine, he claimed to be young Master Wang's old friend. I don't know if it's true or not." Chao Juan boldly came to inform young Master Wang, just in case he is really young Master Wang's friend. She said that he drank wine, but she lamented in her heart. That young master has done his best, but this is the best he can do to smooth things over for you. Inside the house, there was a unique crisp sound of fat jiggling. Grand Master Wang panted and scolded angrily, "Tell that guy to get out of here as soon as possible. If he comes to bother me again, I'll let you have fun with him on the street outside the Peach Cheek house." Chao Juan did not have a trace of luck anymore. She scolded herself for being obsessed. She hoped that Wang Yunshu would not go to Snowsuit's room to do evil. She immediately apologized and was about to leave. The unbearable noise in the room suddenly stopped. "Wait a minute, is he from Lingzhou City?" Chao Gu quietly made a bitter face and wished she could slap herself. Even though Wang Yunshu was in the room and couldn't see her, she still obediently squeezed out a smile and said, "That's right, it's Lingzhou. Master Wang is wise. How is his appearance?" "Not bad. K off. If you continue to play dumb with me, do you believe that I will make you crawl in here and squat by the toilet for the entire night?" He is a rather handsome young man. Did he bring a large group of retainers? No, I only brought one. He is not as imposing as young Master Wang. He is far from being imposing. One? Yes, one is correct. What does a short-sighted woman like you know about imposing? Wait, I will go with you to take a look. The sound of clothes being worn could be heard in the room. It made Chao Juan despair. Chapter 907. Peach Cheek's brothel was an imitation of the southeast and the tube-shaped houses in the Miao area. There was a patio in the middle and there was no cover. It was cool in summer and snowy in winter. However, the interior of the building was divided into 2 rooms. Snowsuit's room faced the street. Like Wang Yunshu's, the 2 rooms were combined into one. It was much more spacious. There was no distinction between the inside and the outside. The interior decoration was extremely luxurious. All the items were expensive. It was far from what Qing Ming-er and Snowsuit's room could compare to. The reason why Wang Yunshu made the Peach Cheek's brothel his god of fortune was because he had a strange hobby. He liked to have sex with women who were not as beautiful as the most popular courtesans. He liked to drag them to the window railings inside to watch the rain fall. It was a feast for the eyes of many customers on the same floor. It was said that it was better to enjoy it together than to enjoy it alone. Therefore, every time young Master Wang came to the Peach Cheek's brothel, there would always be many men who heard the news and hurried over. Even if they could not share the rain and dew, they could at least reward their eyes. Obviously, the people on the same floor didn't get to enjoy it today. Fortunately, Wang Yunshu had said in private that when his father became the governor of Huangnam County, he would definitely make the two courtesans go to the window railings obediently and let everyone enjoy it. This was called a celebration. The door opened. A courtesan who had a bad relationship with the head of the building had a face full of lust. She glanced at Kusanagi from the corner of her eyes. That was a coldness that could only be understood between women. She was gloating. Chao Juan led young Master Wang, who was carelessly draped in a fox fur coat, and walked with difficulty. Wang Yunshu kicked Chao Juan's calf. "Are you lame? Or are your legs weak from being ordered around? Hurry up. If you delay my business, just you wait. I don't care if you're Mother Hong's daughter or not. Hehe, if you lie about military intelligence, don't even mention it. In the army you'll be executed. Anyway, there's no place on your body that's clean. You should have been thrown into the river and drowned in a pig cage long ago. Why would I care about you whores?" Chao Juan bit her lips and smiled. She didn't know who she was smiling at. Wang Yunshu brought the group of evil servants and retainers to the place of his old friend in Lingzhou that Chao Juan mentioned. In Huangnam County he was a young dandy who was like the king of heaven. There was a hint of undetectable haze between his brows. That guy better not have anything to do with that Lin guy. If they were really related to him, even if he was just a small fry, Wang Yunshu would never dare to hit him. Perhaps he could only obediently treat him as a distinguished guest. This wasn't because Wang Yunshu was easy to talk to. There was nothing he could do. In the rich Lingzhou, Wang Yunshu wasn't afraid of almost all the sons of officials and generals. There were only a handful of them. At most, they would mind their own business. The only one he was afraid of was that one. In terms of family background, that guy's father was a primary second-rank official. Not to mention Lingzhou, in the entire Bailiang, only the great general and the new protector of Bailiang, the great demon Chu, could suppress him. His own father was a few steps behind. In terms of skills, 100 Wang Yunshu wouldn't be able to beat him. In terms of military achievements, even someone as thick-skinned as Wang Yunshu didn't have the nerve to compete in this. As long as Wang Yunshu thought of that Li guy, his mood would become gloomier. When he saw the tall and sturdy man standing outside the house with his arms crossed, Wang Yunshu subconsciously stopped and didn't dare to move forward. This was because he felt an aura that was even scarier than when his sworn brother was angry. It was a strong sense of danger, like a cat meeting a tiger. It was true that Wang Yunshu was domineering and unreasonable, but he wasn't so stupid that he couldn't be cured. It has to be known that outside of Lingzhou, the only young master in northern Liang who was even more ferocious than the one with the surname Li set a few golden rules that everyone believed in. For example, if we wastrels want to live a long life, we have to rely on our merits, servants, brothers, and money. These are all treasured weapons that can save lives but not lives. It is better to rely on our brains to live a good life. At first, Wang Yunshu scoffed at these words. Later on, as he muddled along and suffered some hardships, he began to understand the logic behind these words. It was only when Wang Yunshu truly relied on his reputation to fall to the ground that he realized. Many of his friends fell to the ground and didn't have the chance to repent. For example, there was a good friend who went to Bailiang 2 years ago to behave atrociously outside of Bailiang. He killed women and chivalrous people. In the end, he was so arrogant that he killed soldiers. In the end, his corpse couldn't even be found. How could this friend's family background in Lingzhou be any worse than his? People with different statuses had different Jianghu in their eyes. In the Jianghu of prostitutes like Chao Juan and Snowsuit, Li Baisher was the leader of their Jianghu. As for wastrels like Wang Yunshu, that fellow was no different from a wastrel immortal in the Jianghu. Moreover, no one could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Where could you find a wastrel who could go to the throne room of the capital without kneeling to the emperor? Where could you find a wastrel who could bring the old god of swords to the martial emperor city? Wang Yunshu couldn't bear to see others living better lives. However, when it came to some fellows that he couldn't afford to offend, he still knew how to admit defeat. Chao Juan didn't find anything surprising about the retainer at the door who didn't open his eyes. He was just a little taller and more taciturn. However, when she saw the serious expression on Master Wang's face, she started to think about it. Her actions of knocking on the door and pushing it open also became lighter. However, no matter how hard Chao Juan pushed the door, she couldn't push it open. She thought that the door had been locked and was about to open her mouth to remind Master Wang and Snowsuit inside. The retainer slowly opened his mouth and said, "Wait." Chao Juan didn't mind that matter. She didn't even mind that she had a part in it. However, she was afraid that Master Wang behind her would fly into a rage. At that time, not to mention her, even the entire Peach Cheeks restaurant would be implicated. Behind Chao Juan, Master Wang chuckled and said, Just wait a little longer. Chao Juan really felt like she was being roasted on a bonfire. Every day felt like a year. She didn't know how much time had passed. Behind her, Wang Yunshu's face was so gloomy that it could drip water. Come in. Fortunately, 2 words came from inside the room. In Chao Juan's ears, there was no more heavenly voice than this in her life. The door of the house was slowly opened by Shui. Wang Yunshu, who had lost his patience, stepped over the threshold with a sinister smile. He saw a person sitting behind a broken zither that he had never dreamed of. Wang Yunshu would recognize her even if she turned into ashes. Then this big wastrel of Huangnam County made a prompt decision that even he himself admired. With lightning speed, he knelt heavily on the ground, slapped his hands on the ground, and knocked his head solidly on the ground with a bang. Wang Yunshu didn't even dare to fart. He just knelt on the ground. Even if he wasn't a land immortal, he should be at least at the level of 2nd grade master. Chao Juan's mouth twitched outside the room. Snowsuit in the room was even more miserable. She was so frightened that she quickly stood against the wall and covered her heart. She didn't dare to look at him again. What was even more unacceptable to Chao Gu was that the rich young master whom she had mistaken for an ordinary gentry, the one who had accepted the bow of the Grand Prince Wang, was looking at her with a faint smile while holding his cheek with one hand. Chapter 908. I'll be going abroad tomorrow, so I'll be bringing along a notebook with a pleasing font. When the time comes, I'll be posting updates and some photos on the WeChat platform. If you want to follow me, you can search for Fenghua 1985 on your phone or scan the QR code directly. You can find it on Zonghua 1985. Wang Yunshu had just finished his 2nd round with the 2 courtesans of Peach Cheek's house. His body was already like an arrow at the end of its flight. He was trembling as he knelt, but he could only try his best not to move. He was afraid that the slightest movement would cause him to be misunderstood as having ill intentions. Fortunately, Su Fengyin smiled and said, Yunshu, I just told Chao Juan that you and I have a close relationship. Although the loser of the bet last time has to kneel when they meet, you don't have to get addicted to kneeling. Get up, I heard that you're the #1 guest here. Aren't you afraid that Peach Cheek's house will look down on you? Chao Juan's mood today was fluctuating between joy and sorrow. According to her thoughts, Wang Yunshu definitely wouldn't be lying there pretending to be a dead dog because his legs suddenly went soft. The only explanation was that he was a young master from Lingzhou. It was hard to say whether he was Wang Yunshu's old friend, but his family background was definitely far superior to Wang Gongcao's in Huangnam County. If he was a son of an official of the same rank as his father, even if he had been taught an unforgettable lesson, he definitely wouldn't be so submissive to the point of prostrating himself before someone the moment they met. As a little leader, Snowsuit could hide in a daze, but she couldn't. She hurriedly sorted out her thoughts. Apart from the disrespect of sitting on the gray-haired young master's lap and rubbing his buttocks, Chao Juan could be considered honest. However, she was only a prostitute from Peach Cheek's house. Most of the sons of officials were officials, and most of the sons of generals joined the army. Naturally, there would be rats that dug holes in the ground. However, Huangnam County definitely had people like her who followed their mother to become prostitutes, but they were definitely few. Su Fengyin didn't pay attention to Wang Yunshu at all. The reason why he remembered this name was because Wang Yunshu's father was not vulgar, Huangnam County's merit officer, Wang Shihua. The Wang family was a big family in Huangnam County with many ancestral shrines. However, the same family name had different ancestors. There were 4 famous families: Shuijing Wang family, Longyi Wang family, Lingling Su of Gojozian family, and Zijin Wang family. Administrator Li Gongda was an outsider in Huangnam County. The reason why he was able to make a fortune was that he was not only the son-in-law of Longyi Wang family, but also successfully tied together the several big Wang families that were intertwined with each other. If it was said that being an official was a new illness, then the establishment of a family was an old illness that was close to being cured. Wang Yunshu was quick-witted, or else he wouldn't have been able to survive in Huangnam County. He immediately understood that His Royal Highness didn't want to reveal his identity, so he hurriedly stood up and dusted his sleeves in a serious manner. Su Fengyin stood up and gestured to Chao Juan to drink. There was wine in the house, but it wasn't good enough to serve young Master Wang. Chao Juan wanted to go to the wine cellar to get a few jars of wine that had been sealed for many years, but Su Fengyin said that green ants would do. Chao Juan was stunned and didn't dare to question him, but she still subconsciously glanced at Wang Yunshu. This made young Master Wang so angry that smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. He silently cursed this little leader for being blind. Wasn't this setting him up? He immediately threw a fierce look at her, telling her not to be nosy. Chao Juan also knew that she was drawing legs on a snake and hurriedly left. Su Fengyin gestured to Wang Yunshu to sit. Wang Yunshu flatteringly shook his head and hurriedly said that standing was more comfortable. Su Fengyin still carried a chair for Wang Yunshu and stood by the window. Wang Yunshu laughed dryly as he sat down, feeling as if he was sitting on pins and needles. He recited all the names of the bodhisattvas, deities and Buddhas he knew, hoping that this bad-tempered His Royal Highness would not use peaceful means before resorting to force. In Longqing County, even Zhong Hongwu had been dealt with quite a bit, so His Royal Highness could still steam and roast him whenever he wanted. Su Fengyin leaned his elbow against the window and asked, "How is Uncle Wang?" Wang Yunshu swallowed his saliva and nodded. He's fine, he's fine." Su Fengyin, who had always been amiable towards Wang Yunshu, thought for a moment and smiled. Uncle Wang comes from a rare scholarly family in Beiliang. In Huangnam County his knowledge is high, no less than that of the prefect Song Yen. It is said that there was once a Wudong Jinren who observed his physiognomy and gave him a prophecy. What did he say? Wang Yunshu said awkwardly, that unknown old Taoist said that when my father was young, he was addicted to chivalry, riding and archery. Then he was addicted to the study of scriptures and poems. Then he was addicted to the old immortal Huang and the Western Buddhist land. In the end he returned to being a sage. I reckon that whether or not the Taoist priest came from Wudong is another matter. I've made a fool of myself in front of your highness, young Master Su. Su Fengyin shook his head and said, when I was at Wudong Mountain, I did indeed hear such a thing. That old Taoist priest was fully deserving of his title as a Taoist immortal, the old supreme leader Wang Zhonglo. Wang Yunshu was dumbfounded. To be honest, even the Wang family did not take this prophecy seriously. They only saw it as icing on the cake. However, when his father was young, he did indeed ride a horse, carry a sword, and travel to study. He was full of chivalry. However, now that Wang Gongqiao was addicted to Taoism, Wang Yunshu had never seen his father practice martial arts with a sword. He had not even seen his father ride a horse many times. As for his travel experience when he was young, Wang Gongqiao had never mentioned it in front of his only son. Wang Yunshu also thought that these rumors, which his father was unwilling to talk about, were just the flattery of busybodies. Chapter 909. If it was really the old immortal who severed the Kanglin River with one finger, then it would be incredible. Wang Yunshu immediately had a higher opinion of his father, who made enemies on all sides in Lingzhou's officialdom. Not to mention other things, just the fact that he did not see eye to eye with the administrator made Wang Yunshu feel that his future in this life was bleak. Wang Yunshu's ability to observe people's expressions was even more perfect than Chao Juan's. When His Royal Highness talked about the old Wudong leader, his eyes and expression were very gentle, and it was not the kind of feminine softness that made others feel cold in their bones. Of course, Wang Yunshu did not know that between the two mountains, Wudong Mountain and Qingliang Mountain, it could be said that even an immortal sword could not sever it. The green ant wine that everyone was fond of was readily available in Beiliang. Chao Juan quickly brought 4 pots. Su Fengyin and Wang Yunshu naturally took 2 pots. Chao Juan asked for 1 pot herself. Snowsuit was not good at drinking, so the last pot was given to the woman in the mink hat who was pretending to be a servant in green. When she handed the wine over, Chao Juan was suddenly stunned. There was such a beautiful person in the world? Could it be that she could compete with Xiangfan City's Li Shuangjia? Su Yambing had already closed the door and became a door god who did not show his emotions. Su Fengyin held the small wine pot with 2 fingers and gently shook it. He asked mischievously, "Do you still hate Li Hanlin now?" Wang Yunshu drank a mouthful of wine to calm himself down. He had never touched the green ant wine before, but when he drank with His Royal Highness, not to mention the barely tasted green ant, even the dregs of the wine would give rise to the feeling of getting drunk. When he suddenly heard this sentence, Wang Yunshu's weak point, he almost spat out the mouthful of wine. He quickly swallowed the mouthful of strong wine. The wine went down his stomach, but his heart was in his throat again. He carefully smiled bitterly and said, "How would I dare? Young Master Li has already made a name for himself on the border. Don't talk about holding a grudge. If young Master Li comes to Huangnam County to pay respects to his ancestors, I will lead his horse for him." However, before young Master Li left Huangnam County, he said that if he ever sees me again, he will beat me up until even my father won't recognize me. Even if Wang Yunshu wants to apologize, I really don't dare to go to young Master Li and be beaten up. Chao Juan thought that she had grasped the mystery. This young man from Lingzhou must have some kind of relationship with the administrator's son, Li Hanlin. He might even be a relative of the administrator. This was why Wang Yunshu was scared out of his wits. Su Fengnian nodded as if he believed Wang Yunshu. He casually asked, I heard that you have a sworn brother who is a military officer in Huangnam County. He is in charge of a battalion of soldiers and horses. He has 300 to 400 armored soldiers under his command. All of them are light cavalry, and their war horses are all B grade. They wouldn't be bad even if they were placed on the border of Yuliang. They are far more elite and skilled in battle than the military officers in the county? Wang Yunshu scratched his head and chuckled. He grinned and said with an honest face, they are just for show. Of course they are good looking. If they really go to the border and fight with the barbarians, I don't think they will be good. They are all new soldiers who have never fought before. However, to be honest, many of them are the direct disciples of the gangs in Huangnam County. They are not good at fighting, but they are good at fighting. Since young Master Su has asked about these family scandals, I can only tell the truth. If there is anything wrong, young Master Su can tell Wang Yunshu. I will explain it to my father and my sworn brother. In any case, I can guarantee that everything will go according to young Master Su's wishes. Chao Juan, who heard every word, was even more surprised. Could it be that this young master from Lingzhou was not as simple as just a descendant of the Li family? Otherwise, how could he give orders to Huangnam County's military and politics? The conflict between rich playboys would break the sky and fight with each other. The two groups of people would invite immortals to fight until the sky was dark. The worst-case scenario would be the soldiers in bright armor being their accomplices. There was no reason for it to be serious enough to shake the foundation of the family. In the impression of the head of the Peach Cheeks house, there really was no young second generation from Huangnam County who could surpass their parents and challenge those old foxes in the officialdom. Huangnam County was Beiliang's granary. The officials who could abuse their power here were not simple. Governor Song Yan's methods were swift and fierce, and Wang Gongqiao was also famous for being watertight. It could be said that all of them were like a hornet's nest. Su Fengnian smiled and said, there are too many rich people in Huangnam County. However, many of them can't find a temple even if they carry a pig's head. In the end, it's because they don't have enough ability. Back then, when they fought for the position of governor of Fengzhou, it wasn't Uncle Wang who lost to the administrator. It was the Wang family from the water school who lost to the Wang family from Longyi. They were suppressed by the administrator for so many years that they couldn't even become the governor of Huangnam County. Then they were ostracized by Song Yan, who was one rank higher than them. It was already not easy for them to be able to sit on the fishing platform and firmly hold the power to distribute the county official's hat. Now, Governor Song is finally going to move from Huangnam County to Lingzhou to be the governor. Wang Yunshu's expression was complicated. Did His Royal Highness want his father to take a step forward? Su Fengnian didn't keep Wang Yunshu in suspense. He directly explained the stakes to Wang Yunshu. However, the position of governor still has to be filled by an official from the Wang family from Longyi. The rules in the officialdom are passed down from generation to generation. They can't be broken just because they want to. Otherwise they'll be hated too much. What I'm curious about right now is whether or not your sworn brother has any real ability. Wang Yunshu gritted his teeth and said, that's my sworn brother. At this point he glanced at Chao Juan, who was listening attentively. Su Fengnian smiled and said, Miss Chao Juan, you and Snowsuit go exchange for some fresh food. Once the outsiders left, Wang Yunshu immediately stood up and carefully worded his words. Your Highness, my sworn brother is called Jiao Wui. He has some ability and has made a lot of military achievements at the border of Yuzhou. Unfortunately, he was framed by his colleagues. Not only did my father lose more than 10,000 taels of silver, my sworn brother almost didn't make it back to Huangnam County alive. However, our Wang family admits to this grudge. Wang Yunshu won't complain to your Highness. My sworn brother Jiao Wui often drowned his sorrows in Huangnam County in the past few years, but he didn't lose his martial arts. During this time he often led the soldiers to the river to cut ice and had them jump into the river to freeze. If they couldn't endure it, they had to leave. I'm not trying to deceive your Highness by saying good things about my sworn brother, but I've never seen such a ferocious commandant. Su Fengnian smiled and said, if you go to the border and take a look, you'll know that it's nothing. Wang Yunshu's face immediately turned red. He said embarrassedly, Your Highness, please don't blame me. Wang Yunshu is short-sighted. Su Yanbing coughed softly. Almost at the same time, Su Fengnian waved his hand at Wang Yunshu. Then he turned around and stood by the window looking at the Shitakian. Chapter 9-10. Su Fengnian stood by the window. He turned his head and waved at the confused Wang Yunshu. After he came closer, he said softly, Go and tell your sworn brother that for your sake, I'll allow him to lead the army into the city. There's a good opportunity for him to earn military merits without doing any work. Wang Yunshu rubbed his hands vigorously and said eagerly, Your Highness, can I also join in the fun? Su Fengyin smiled and asked, Do you have the status of a soldier? Wang Yunshu also confessed. He blushed and said, Yes, yes, yes. My father wants to save face. He thinks that I'm not doing my job properly. He takes me out to meet his colleagues during festivals, which makes him lose face. So, he asked my sworn brother for the position of a small squad leader. Su Fengyin said playfully, A small squad leader? That's a position that can only be obtained by killing barbarians at the border. Young Master Wang was horrified. He laughed dryly and didn't know how to salvage the situation. Su Fengyin didn't care about it. He waved his hand and said, Hurry up and discuss with your sworn brother. When the time comes, you don't have to come to Peach Cheek's restaurant. Let the Jianghu army split into two. You and him will go to Qingrong Temple and Liantang respectively. If the city gate asks, say that it's Governor Song Yan's order. If anyone asks, say that it's me who asked you to go. Wang Yunshu said goodbye and ran out of Peach Cheek's restaurant with the retainers and evil slaves in the corridor. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, Chao Juan and Snowsuit, who were a little further away, looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know what was going on. Su Yambing walked to the window and looked at Xianxia. He smiled and said, Congratulations to your highness for your enlightenment while playing the zither. Su Fengyin nodded and lamented, The world only knows that there are big mistakes in the false realm, but it seems that there are also good times when there are mistakes. Su Yambing shook his head and said, His Royal Highness's fake realm is like a painting that a collector would like to borrow for a look. The collector would uncover a corner of the painting and then quickly take it back. This kind of fake realm is obviously less harmful than the artist's own painting going astray. Furthermore, what His Highness has comprehended this time is not the profound finger of inquiring immortality, but the vast azure heavenly phenomenon. This was due to His Highness' 20 years of studying, as well as what he had seen and heard in his 3 travels. Reading 10,000 books, traveling 10,000 miles, was the reason why scholars passed down from generation to generation, and had to travel 10,000 miles. Only by doing so would one be able to accumulate sufficient strength and achieve success at a certain point in time. However, what Su Yambing said is all theoretical. His Highness was able to comprehend the essence of the heavenly phenomenon even after experiencing the false realm and falling realm. Even Su Yambing admits that he is unable to do so. Su Fengyin smiled and said, Uncle Su, you are someone who is about to transcend the mortal world and enter the divine world. Don't put in good words for me, a second-level internal force half-baked guy. Su Yambing dismissed it with a smile. Su Fengyin muttered in his heart. The realm he had just touched upon was too ethereal and mysterious, but it did not seem to be the profound finger or the heavenly phenomenon. It was as if with a hook of his finger, he could make some objects that seemed to be close to him but were actually thousands of miles away break through the air and arrive. However, this kind of realm was fleeting and was not reliable. As for how to grasp the details, it would depend on his future opportunities. Ever since the betrayal of Black Carp in Huangnam County and the secret cooperation of Hans Hang, an old spy with a high position in Beimeng, the spy network in the county was rotten. The more experienced a person was, the easier it was for them to be exposed. The spy circle had a habit of catching pairs. There were catching pairs between friends and enemies after their identities were exposed, and there were also catching pairs between people of the same camp. However, the latter was usually only the important literary spies who had reached a certain position had the qualifications to be watched and protected by military spies. Many literary spies did not know who had died for them in their entire lives. Often, they would only be informed of someone's death when they had to evacuate in an emergency. Hans Hang was undoubtedly an important part of Beimeng's infiltration into Beiliang's granary. With a literary spy like Hans Hang, whose martial arts cultivation did not match his identity, naturally, there would be the old bastard that Su Fengyin had mentioned lurking at the bottom of the quagmire. However, a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. No one knew what surprises would be in the 3 nests. In this secret assassination, the Eagle Guard was mainly responsible for Qingrong Temple, where there were relatively few spies. The peregrine falcon was to peck at the fat meat of the entire lotus pond. There were orders from the higher-ups that they could not kill by mistake but not by mistake. These 2 groups of Beiliang killers were very powerful and required a lot of energy, material, and manpower to deal with. Therefore, these 2 groups of men of sacrifice not only wore soft armor and short knives, but also carried bows and crossbows. Xianxia was the least valued of the 3 groups. Some of the miscellaneous people with low ranks were thrown here. Both the Peregrine Falcon and the Eagle Guard were sent here. The competition between them was inevitable. Hong Shuwen and Ren Shanyu were in this group. Ren Shanyu was only one of the two small leaders. There was also an old man whose name had been forgotten. He was used to calling him Old Tree Stump. It was said that he had been a man of sacrifice in Bailiang for many years. However, until today he had never been to Bailiang Palace, let alone seen the general at close range. He had the air of an old-fashioned man of Jianghu. Chapter 9:11. The manager of the Peregrine Falcon was a sloppy middle-aged man whose surname was Song. This time, other than the two groups of people who were on the lookout and hunting down the fish that slipped through the net, there were 6 people who entered Shitakian. This man with the surname Song pretended to be a rich man from another place and wore a thick gold chain that weighed several kilograms around his neck. Hong Shuwen was his bad friend and Ren Shanyu was Master Song's private foxy woman. The other 3 people were the elites of the Peregrine Falcon. They wore retainer outfits and didn't carry any weapons, but they all had daggers and short hooks hidden inside. Before entering Shitakian, they had roughly communicated with each other about what they were good at and what kind of weapons they used. Being men of sacrifice was not a joke. No one was allowed to be a hero alone. Once there was a battle that was roughly evenly matched, whether there was cooperation or skillful cooperation, the outcome would be completely different. It might even be the difference between life and death. Chai Filu's main target was a woman who had recently become the most popular courtesan. She wasn't necessarily more beautiful than the previous courtesans, but men liked the new and disliked the old. This made her business seem particularly good. Tonight, a lord from Fengyang County spent 700 taels to get her out of the competition, which meant that she would have to spend the night outside. However, he had underestimated the market for courtesans in Shitakian. As soon as he heard that this lord from Fengyang County was going to be kicked out, someone immediately offered 600 taels. The old man had no choice but to ask for 100 taels back and give up on the idea of being kicked out of the competition. He had no choice but to leave a beautiful maidservant in a private residence outside. According to the spy report that Wang Tongke had unearthed, the procuress in Chai Filu who was responsible for matchmaking between the boss and the rich and powerful was also a spy who was born in Bailiang but turned to Beimang halfway through. In addition, the guard instructor and several fellow apprentices of this brothel were real Beimang's men of sacrifice. There were a total of 8 or 9 people in Chai Filu, and only half of them were capable of risking their lives. Therefore, everyone was an expert. The Peregrine Eagle Guard, 16 or 17 people coordinated from inside and outside, so there was no suspense. In fact, it was indeed very smooth at the beginning. The leader of the Peregrine Eagle, Song Gu, and Ren Shanyu went to a room that had been booked long ago. It happened that the top floor of the building was the room where the courtesan received her guests. He called for a half-famous courtesan. The brothel did not reject the guests who brought their own women, but it was not easy to let a famous courtesan play with a stranger. Even if the courtesan herself was willing, the brothel would most likely reject it. This was because they were afraid that the value of the famous courtesan that they had painstakingly raised would fall after making a fuss. Therefore, without a high price, it was impossible to invite her. Hong Shuwen, who was hired by Song Gu, got a big bag of silver. He kept pestering the brothel keeper and shamelessly asked her to make an exception for him. In fact, Hong Shuwen was not bad-looking. He was a disciple of a rich family in Bailiang, and he killed people to show his heroic spirit. The woman, who was about 27 or 28 years old, might have taken a fancy to this guy. Even though Hong Shuwen's money was not enough for her, she still agreed. However, she was a brothel keeper in Shitakian and had countless trivial matters to deal with. So, she asked Hong Shuwen to be more efficient and finish the job quickly. Hong Shuwen agreed with a smile and exposed his shortcomings. He said that he was famous for riding fast, which made the woman look at him coquettishly. The spring night was short and no one thought that life was too long. Little by little, the 3 Peregrine Falcons who were familiar with the terrain of Shitakian found the guards who were drinking in the small courtyard and killed them without saying a word. On an embroidered bed, the woman who sensed the killing intent wanted to break Hong Shuwen's spine with her hand. As a result, Hong Shuwen hit her dantian first, and then his 5 fingers were like hooks, strangling her white and tender neck. He watched her die little by little and said with a smile, "I have to take the money back later. We slept together because we liked each other. What's the matter with spending money to buy sex?" Almost at the same time, Song Gu was admiring the sight of a prostitute stripping. He walked up behind her and she turned around to look at him with a smile. Song Gu smiled and covered her mouth with his hand. He then punched her in the chest and killed her on the spot. Ren Shanyu, who had been impatient for a long time, jumped on the table, tiptoed, and stuck to the ceiling like a gecko. After confirming the movement upstairs, she tore the plank with her hands and found the position of the spy prostitute. She only saw a charming scene. The woman's clothes were half taken off and her hands were on the table, revealing a large part of her snow-white fat under her waist. An old man in luxurious clothes was raising his hand and was about to slap the two pieces of fat. Seeing Ren Shanyu appear out of nowhere, the old man was obsessed with lust and was not too frightened. Instead, he looked at Ren Shanyu's soft breasts with a playful smile. However, the Shitakian prostitute with a perky but had a strong murderous look in her eyes. Instead of lifting her skirt and putting on her clothes, she slapped the table and twisted her 5 fingers slightly. She was like a gorgeous butterfly, spinning toward the uninvited guest Ren Shanyu. The female eagle guard, who did not carry a pair of Xinhua broad axes, was about to block when an arm appeared from the floor. It grabbed the prostitute's slender ankle and pulled it down hard. She was dragged downstairs and disappeared without a trace. Ren Shanyu's face was full of anger. She had a deep grudge against Songgu. Originally, she planned to assassinate the prostitute, Songgu to deal with the Shitakian brothel, and Hong Shuwen to support the 3 peregrine falcons. However, Songgu let Hong Shuwen do the hard work and stayed in the room. The prostitute in the same room did not need to die at all. She only needed to be knocked out. Just when Ren Shanyu was in a trance, the gentleman from the neighboring county, who came back to his senses, quietly stretched out his hand. His palm was facing up, under the table, and he gently lifted the table. The table quickly spun and smashed toward Ren Shanyu. With a sudden murderous intent, Ren Shanyu kicked out and broke the heavy hardwood table. Then she saw an old and gloomy face getting closer and closer. She was hit on the forehead by a palm. Her petite body directly broke through the wall and was slapped out of the building. When she was about to fall on the street, Ren Shanyu, whose consciousness was getting more and more blurred, regretted. If she had the pair of axes in her hands, maybe she would not be so useless.